And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another evening of racing in the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy for 2023. Hosted by Gone Skipping Racing, sponsored by Musical Money, and brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. This is a series which is a celebration and dedicated to the Skip Barber Formula 2000, an open-wheel cockpit machine which, throughout the ages, has seen the rise of many a driver into infamy with regards to it being the starting point of their career, where it be the likes of Juan Pablo Montoya, as one of many of you will know as a Formula 1 driver and also a NASCAR grade, through to the likes of many other drivers throughout the world. This car is one that's absolutely fanatical with regards to its following, but also in the fact that it generates absolutely close racing. And here today, it's round 7 and 8 of the championship. Of course, 24 rounds of racing, and the story continues, and we return to the United States of America for none other than the state of Georgia, and it is the Brazelton Circuit or Road Atlanta. Known in thought as the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta, this circuit is likened to be the roller coaster ride for road racing, with severe undulations, sweeping corners, and major elevation changes into blind apexes, seeing our drivers really having to make sure they've got all the confidence in carrying the speed from corner to corner. And indeed, with there being so many blind apexes, it means that you've got to have faith in your ability to take the car into the next corner and set it up for the run into the following sequence of corners. Get it right and you'll find yourself coming out on top. Get it wrong, however, you may just find yourself falling off the circuit, alternatively losing out at the most critical juncture. But as we get ready to go racing today, let's take you through our schedule times in British Summer Time, that's BST, or Universal Coordinated Time +1 at UTC +1. Our schedule is as follows. In just over 18 minutes time, we'll be heading into our qualifying session, 15 minutes in duration. We'll see all of our drivers out of the circuit, as always, looking to pump in their best possible lap times. And once they conclude the session, we'll see where they fall onto the grid for our first race of the day. That'll be the round 7 sprint, and that'll be at approximately 8:45 tonight. And that'll be 20 minutes of racing action with no pit stop expected. And then we'll take a brief breather before returning for the grid for our second race of the day. And that'll be the round 8 feature, 40 minutes in duration, double the time duration compared to the sprint, and with it also the inclusion of a mandatory pit stop. And that'll get underway at approximately 9:10. But of course, as time wears on and we get ready to go into that qualifying session in due course, you're tuning in live via the official YouTube broadcast brought to you on youtube.com, and indeed at the YouTube channel of TX141 at TX or Paul Walsh. Speaking of whom, allow me to introduce myself as your host and commentator. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I'll be bringing you all your racing action tonight and indeed for the remainder of the season. And as we look to the season schedule, we can see that we have still got a long way to go. For last time, we were in Australia at the Mount Panorama circuit, but everybody knows it as Bathurst, of course, rounds 5 and 6, and today it will be on the 7th of April, it's Road Atlanta. After today, we'll continue the run through the United States with the West Virginia State circuit of Summit Point, and then we'll return into Australia for Phillip Island to complete the first half of the season. But focusing on where we are now and what's preceded us, of course, we started off all the way back in rounds 1 and 2 at the Charlotte Speedway Roval, and there on the 17th of March, things got underway in absolutely fantastic fashion, with plenty of battles to talk about up and down the field. Indeed, there were many a name in qualifying that stood tall, but they fell by the wayside in the races, and conversely, those who did not emerge in qualifying as favourites in terms of pace end up being very strong in the races and really putting it together. In rounds 3 and 4, it was the Sebring International Raceway. The full course, of course, playing host to our drivers on the 24th of March. And there we saw at Sebring in the state of Florida, it was all about the nip and tuck. It was about the 3 wide, the 4 wide, and also the 2 wide into the corners. And now our drivers didn't let the change of road surface from concrete to asphalt and back and forth converse them or indeed upset them. Instead, they just simply pressed on and got on with the job. And it was absolutely fantastic racing to the very end in the feature, just as much as it was in the sprint race. And last time out in the Australian mountain, of course, at Mount Panorama, or Mount Walla as it used to be known, or Bathurst as everybody nicknames it, in rounds 5 and 6, we got to see there the tenacity of many a driver in the battles down the straights and also over the mountain, and many a big moan under brake, and also some rather controversial moments in terms of incidents, but indeed those have been rectified and the stewards have made their decisions, and we press on to today. And with the clamour down in the pit lane being absolutely at its peak, of course we now progress into a recap of the championship standings so far and what we could potentially see here today. For as we look to our Drivers' Championship, there only been one championship at stake, and that is the Drivers' Championship. We can see the top 10, Nathan Wade leading the way there on 190 points, and he really has been the consistent figure throughout the opening 6 rounds. He has not dropped a key result so far. Yes, he may have dropped off of the podium perhaps in a certain race, but he's been picking up the points compared to everybody else, and he has become the man to beat. On 190 versus Geoff Randall's 120, that 70-point gap is going to keep Wade in good stead, with Geoff Randall there looking to try and close the gap a little bit further, having jumped 2 places in Australia, moving up from P4 to P2, and right now he is in the hot seat with regards to mounting the change to Wade, because Randall has got only 2 points behind him. Mark Beckhouse, who under 118 points, whilst he was not able to bring any points home last time out, not being in attendance in Australia, he's definitely one of those as well whose consistency has really shone through. And Cristian Pérez in P4 now on 116 points. You can see there the gaps of 2 points apiece really continue to follow on through. And the fact that Pérez having a good time last time out in Australia, perhaps losing a couple of points compared to what he wanted, but still bringing on home a key win, and Nathan Wade also bringing on home the win, and therefore the 2 winners continue to make progress. Stefan Ehrmann, meanwhile, in P5, only a further 2 points behind then. You can see this theme of those 2 points, where the top 5 right now really broken apart by the race leader, but then you have the battle from P2 through to P5 standing at a gap of only 6 points, as Stefan Ehrmann, not one to be underestimated either, not in attendance last time out, but still looking to come back today and bring home some major points if he is in attendance. We then see outside the top 5, Rasmus S, Vuori, who continues to show to everybody that pace we saw at Charlotte Road when qualifying, albeit the dismal day he had in the races, is not going to upset his temperament, in the fact that Vuori right now is putting together both qualifying pace and race pace, and really started to re-emerge on the scene, now moving up to P6 on 108 points, with what is a 17-point advantage over Jack Atkinson, who's gained 2 places to move into P7. Jack Atkinson, a little bit of a dark horse we saw at Australia, able to put himself right into the medley of the battle for the win, and indeed the podium places, ahead of David J. Burns, with Gordon van den Bergen having moved up 12 places after a huge set of points in Australia last time out, onto 68 points now, only 1 point behind David J. Burns, and only 1 point clear of Juan Z. Rodriguez. And you can see that Rodriguez dropping 2 places down to P10 and keeping inside the top 10 by a small margin, having gained only a light amount of points given the racing down under. We then look outside the top 10, and we can see there from Rodriguez to P11, with Ryan Jackson holding the aforementioned position. It's less than only at 3 points, as there Ryan Jackson on 66 points, 23 gained last time out, and only 1 point clear of Enzo Canta, and we'll come on to Canta very shortly. But Ryan Jackson continuing to impress in the midfield and continuing to pick up that headway, and can he potentially continue to fight his way into the top 5 here? Enzo Canta, meanwhile, the driver that everybody was talking down the paddock after the racing last week, in the fact that he made his debut and picked up 65 points, while the greatest number of points gained in Australia, and Canta showing great pace, albeit getting very elbows out in the sprint race, and things didn't quite work out as perhaps he wanted them to necessarily, but Canta definitely the driver right now who seems to be able to take a torch to the pace set by Nathan Wade, your championship leader. But Canta, of course, will be wary of the fact he's only 1 point clear of Paul Smithhurst, and Kevin Bergen only a further few points back there, 8 points off of Smithhurst in P14. Remco Plessia completes the top 15 there, gaining 1 place since last time out, and Adam Miles as well, another driver to watch out for, particularly we saw in the feature race in Australia, really making his efforts count and moving on to 47 points and jumping in there with his debut in Australia, and now in P16 he'll look to try and break into the top 10 tonight. We then have Rodi Vendermeiden in P17, ahead of Chris Wayne, with Steven Krumholz and Titus de Jong completing at the top 20. We then come outside the top 20 to look through 21st through to 30th, and we see Daniel Tufts there gaining 2 places last week and gaining 14 points to his tally, but only 1 point clear of Nick Vaughan Roberts, who was not in attendance. Daniel Tufts was showing great midfield pace as well, and really trying to push on for a place inside the bottom portion of the top 10, and can he try and break his way a little bit deeper into the standings tonight? That would be the change for him, with Neil R. Gardner then P23 on 27 points, and also making his debut with AJ Campbell a further with 3 points behind. Ludwig Sauer P at 25, 2 points clear of Clark Williams, with Paula Anzios having a difficult time in Australia and only able to gain 6 more points to his campaign, and then Terry McGrath, Peter van der Noord and Benjamin Harris complete the top 30. And as we look outside the top 30 for our final 8 drivers here, it's Nigel Easy, who gained 3 points last time out, but has moved outside the top 30 for the first time this season, ahead of JT Kopinen, and then Arnaud Chabanet in P at 33 on 1 point after his debut, and Dario Frattini, Marcel Brunschweiler, Wojtek Potuzek, Ollie Pimley and Dave Devine complete your Drivers' Championship standings. But as we then come onto our circuit for today, of course it's the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta short layout, located near the town of Brazelton in Hall County in the state of Georgia in the United States of America. And as you can see from the circuit map provided to us by iRacing.com, thank you to them for their wonderful circuit maps and of course their brilliant simulator, this short layout cuts off the major straightaways in the run up towards Vuori on the full course, turns 6 and 7, and the run back down towards the chicane, which is at turns 7 and 8 here on the circuit map. But whilst we may lose a couple of the straights, we're not losing the majority of the key artefacts of the course, and you can see here from the circuit map, we've got a large number of sweeping corners. However, what this circuit map does not show you, of course, because it is two-dimensional, not three-dimensional, is the amount of undulation and elevation change that this circuit brings together. For as our drivers make their way across the start-finish line and up towards turn number 1, they'll turn uphill into the right-hander, and there it's all about carrying momentum and using the road camber to your advantage. And as they head through turn 1 and up the rise towards turns 2 and 3, the key thing here is as they brake for turn number 2, their effect actually braking for turn number 3, and it's a blind apex into the downhill right-hander of turn 3. So essentially, as soon as you crest turn 2, you've got to be on the brakes, and you will not be sighting the apex of turn 3 until you've already committed to the brakes and brought your speed down. But get it right, it'll be the fast-flying run through turns 3 and 4 before they make their way into the S's there. Not numbered corners, but it's a serpentine sequence, and then where normally the turn 5 corner would buck off to the left, instead our drivers will be carrying all the way round to the right on the short course, making it through the double right at turns 5 and 6 to return onto the back stretch and head downhill into the drop into the chicane. The turn 7 8 chicane is going to be a challenging one for our drivers, given the fact they want to carry as much speed as possible between the two apexes in the straight line. But as they make their way out of turn 8, they'll go up the rise into turn number 9, and then downhill they'll charge into turn number 10 to complete the lap and do it all again. But as we then come onto our rules for today, of course, here in terms of car setup, this is an open setup series, meaning that our drivers are allowed to take the setup of their desire to the circuit. The only thing they are allowed to adjust on the car, given the limited tuning nature of the SBF 2000 machine, are tyre pressures, fuel, brake balance, spring perch offset, and anti-roll bar. And in terms of car fuel loads, they shall be restricted to 60% for all race day sessions, and you'll see why that is in effect very shortly. Qualifying wise, an open qualifying format shall be used for our qualifying sessions, and that means you'll see all drivers out of the circuit for the 15 minutes. And as we come to our race rules, you can see in general, firstly, that races shall commence via a standing start, as is the tradition of this series, with one fast repair being available in both races. And a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 17 or more instant points in a given race, and they shall be disqualified from the race if they accumulate 25 or more instant points. Sprint race wise, there are no mandatory pit stop requirements, so we see a driver come into the pit, it's due to a penalty or alternatively damage that they need to repair. But in the feature race, this is where the 60% fuel load is a key factor, in the fact that we'll see there's one mandatory pit stop in which drivers must take on fuel, but of course we skipped over a key factor as well, in the fact that the grid for the feature race shall be set based on results of the sprint race, with the top 10 finishing positions inverted. What does that mean in layman's terms? That means the winner of the sprint race will be starting in P10 for the feature race, and we work our way down from first through to 10th in terms of the sprint race finishers. The 10th place finisher will be starting on pole for the feature race, and then 11th downwards in terms of the finishers in the sprint race. Well, that's exactly where they're going to be starting on the grid for the purposes of the feature. That's enough rules, regulation, everything in between. I know what you're all here for, ladies and gents, but you're here for the racing. As we head back to our live pictures, we see our drivers making their way around on circuit currently, and here is your championship leader deciding to negotiate his way onto an escape road there. Nathan Wade actually parking up and will decide, I think, to go back to the pit lane. But of course the privateer, your championship leader by a sizable margin, and thinking about what he can achieve here today, with the likes of Neil Gardner and company all looking to try and take the fight to him and really prove that it's not a one-man band at the very top of those championship standings. But as we look to Geoff Randall, of course your second place driver in the championship at the moment for Gonskip Racing in the 107, more the Britain here, he's been fighting hard to try and make himself and move into that P2 position, but he's got a long way to go to bring down Wade in terms of that gap, and this is where he'll begin that campaign tonight. There'll be no question about it, but he's definitely got his work cut out for him. But as we do say hello to a good number of you in the YouTube chat, and don't be shy, feel free to say hi if you're tuning in and you've got access to the chat. Let us know how your Easter holiday is going so far and what you've got planned for the extended weekend, if you do have bank holidays in your country of residence. As we do see then, say hello to Matthew Shepka, who says, Skippy, Paul, a man after my own heart. Well, I get the feeling that Matthew Shepka is a big fan of the Barber Formula 2000, or the Skippy as it's also known, and we can see there that with regards to his faults on the circuit, Road Atlanta's short config is going to make it a blender in terms of how close the racing will be, and that's definitely what we're expecting here. We also say hello there to Jatco26. I do believe that might be Jack Atkinson in the YouTube chat saying, good evening, Paul, can't make this round, so look looking forward to watching along, well, we're very happy to have you with us. Of course, we miss seeing you out of the circuit, but all the same, having the drivers who can't make the races be joining us via the YouTube, that's absolutely fantastic to see. We also had to say hello there to Zaldi and also to Medmo. And good evening to you, Medmo, who says a lovely evening for some skipping around. And well, that's 100% accurate. And I hope you both are doing well there, Zaldi and Medmo. But as we do look to Cristian Pérez making his way on through the Esses and in towards shortly turn number 5. Well, the Astro Racing driver also one to watch out for here. We saw the Spaniard flying at Bathurst and find himself right up there in contention for the win in both races. And I think the number 89 driver here would love to make it a double. And that's the one change that all of our drivers do have at the moment. We have yet to see, unless my memory is mistaken, we have yet to see somebody take 2 wins out of 2 on a given race evening. We've always seen 2 different winners. It's been a similar pointings. We have had some repeat winners already. Nathan Way, perhaps the most important repeat winner in terms of where he sits in the championship. We've yet to see somebody be able to make it 2 out of 2 on a given race night. And this Road Atlanta circuit, with its width available to our drivers, given the small nature or the small width of the Skip Barber Formula 2000 machines, it does mean we are likely to see a lot of potential overtaking opportunities and also some very daring moves with that. And what we mean is here, and this circuit, if you've ever watched GT3 racing around here, or indeed a mixed class high downforce machine at racing, you'll know that this circuit does not offer many overtaking opportunities compared to other circuits available on their calendars, where it's completely inverted when it comes to the SBF 2000 machines, for the simple reason here, all that circuit width is available and these cars are quite comfortable to control. But as we look to some new debutants who join us tonight, we start off with the Sim RC driver from Germany, the number 12 driver of Team Vuori, as he makes his way a little bit wayward there at turn number 5. Oh, goodness me. And it's a knock to the wall there and the car goes over, and that's where if you get it wrong, it is going to end in tears, and that will be a car that needs to be taken to the pit lane. Well, that's not the way he'll want it to go when he goes into his qualifying and race sessions on his debut, but we wish him all the best of luck and we look forward to seeing how he gets on. And when I had the opportunity to catch up with him in the build-up to tonight, well, he was just saying that he was looking forward to going racing, and well, we look forward to seeing how he gets on. There's no question about it. And our other debutant for today, albeit I don't think he's out of circuit currently, and indeed he's not in the pit lane, is Ryan Walker, the Briton, who we will take a look at in the number 8 car when we head into the qualifying session, or alternatively if he does make his way back out into circuit before we head into the qualifying session. But we do have 2 new JVTs tonight, and that's the form of Ryan Walker and also Team at Vuori, so good luck to them. Indeed, good luck to all of our drivers taking part. No favourites here in the commentary booth, but as we look to the Skips Racing driver, Kevin Budgen, making his way down through the final corner. What's it going to take here to do Road Atlanta? We'll come on to the qualifying lap very shortly. But in general here, we're going to be expecting very close racing from start to finish. We saw at Bathurst how critical the toe was and how trying to break away through the complex corner sequences over the mountain played a key part of how the race evolved. Here you're going to see a similar calibre to that, but the difference is we do not really have an extended straight as such here at Road Atlanta. We have the start-finish straight, and we arguably have the run out of turns 5, 6 down towards the chicane of turns 7 and 8. But we do not have an extended straightaway where our drivers have that option to be able to go 2, 3 wide in very gradual succession. Here, moves are going to be sharp, they're going to be fast, and therefore drivers are going to be ready to try and cut deep with regards to making those moves at a late stage. And therefore, this will be quite a tactical pair of races, but also we're going to have to see some drivers really come out in terms of their confidence. But as we look to Terry McGrath making his way on around here, or 3.5 minutes left in the practice session, and get himself comfortable. And indeed, we do recommend to you, ladies and gentlemen, that if you are currently tuned in, get yourselves comfortable. If you haven't taken that last restroom break, you definitely need to take it now, because when we get underway, you won't want to miss a single second of this. Make sure you've got a nice beverage with you, whether it's hot or cold. Personally, my preference at the moment is a cold beverage, but of course, if you do fancy a cup of tea, well, we can't blame you for that, or a cup of coffee if you're not a tea person. But indeed, get yourselves set as we do look to Rodi van der Meijden as he tucks in behind there. McGrath making his way up the hill. In fact, switching places with McGrath there, the STN driver, and the Dutchman has been one of those drivers who's had mixed fortunes over the first 6 rounds. We have seen him have moments of brilliance. We've also seen him have some moments of difficulty, and could he potentially find a way today to really push that brilliance through as he heads on down the hill? The same could be said for some other drivers as well, including the likes of what is Gordon van den Bergen, who really came alive at Bathurst. We got to see the Sickhead Racing driver in the Fanta machine. Of course, we quizzed him about the fact, does he like Fanta? Well, in fact, he was a bit more of a different soft drinks driver as he makes his way on through there. He said that he picked the Fanta livery because he does like the colours. Indeed, we can't blame him for that. The colours colours are very beautiful on the number 50 car as piloted by the German, but as he makes his way out to turn 6 and down towards 7 and 8, practicing a little bit his tyre warming strategy there, and that'll be critical, of course, when going into qualifying. He'll want as much temperature as possible as soon as possible. But as he comes down towards turn 7 and 8 and through, we see Audi there saying, got a cold Pepsi for myself. Oh, indeed, that's good to hear. And, well, of course, the argument of, are you a Pepsi or a Coke person? I must admit, I'm a Pepsi person rather than the Coke person myself. But as we come from soft drinks, and one of our soft drinks drivers getting it slightly wrong there, coming over the riser turn at number 9, we do look to what is Ryan Jackson. And Jackson, another driver as well, everybody does need to watch out for. We have seen Jackson have these moments where he creeps into the top 10 fight and creeps into the fight for the top 5 places. And the number 23 car, as powered by Shell V-Power, is definitely one of those cars right now that is a menace. And we are seeing these drivers that are becoming these dark horses from round to round. Jackson may not be up there in the championship standings compared to the likes of Randall, Wade and company, but he is a driver who can never be counted out for the fact he will be there. If somebody drops a result, he will be there to pick up the points and the pieces very quickly. And as he comes on through turns 7 and 8, of course, we've got plenty of drivers in the pit lane. We've got 23 drivers in participation today, and well, we do have a slightly reduced field compared to perhaps what we'd normally expect, and the reason for that, of course, is the Easter holiday. We do have a number of drivers who are currently on travels or are staying with family, and we hope they're having a great Easter. But as we do look to call on Bergen once again, the drivers who are here today will be looking to try and capitalise on the slightly reduced field. But of course, that doesn't always work out in practice, in the fact you may have less drivers on circuit, but the offset of that is true as well in the fact that with there being less drivers, the points become ever more critical, and then it really does come down to those fine margins, because everybody will know this is an opportunity to gain some huge points with certain drivers being in absenteeism. But as we look to Pala Anzioso, meanwhile, Anzioso really had difficulty for Arton Motorsport Blue down under in Australia. The Italian just not quite on the pace compared to many, but a very different circuit today as well. Got a lot of undulations, much like Mount Panorama, but they are very different in the way they approach on the corners, and therefore we could see Anzioso have a better day today, as this final practice session has the checker flag come out, and it's time, ladies and gentlemen, for us to make our way into the qualifying session very shortly. As Cristian Pérez, the last driver out of the circuit currently, and in fact he comes to a halt and decides enough's enough. But as we transition over to qualifying then, it's going to be 15 minutes, and who will be on pole by the end of it? Well, let's find out, as all our drivers very rapidly make the way out of the pit lane as soon as possible. And of course, we have seen in all of our qualifying sessions so far the potency of slipstream, and you may recall Nathan Wade taking pole position down under in Bathurst by 6.5 tenths, because he had the perfect lap, not just in terms of the fact he picked up the toe, but also he nailed every apex. It was a lap that could not be matched by anybody out there, but that's exactly what Wade put together. And so we will be seeing our drivers run a long snake train around here. As you can see already, Randall tucked in behind Wade as they make the way through the right hand of turns 5 and 6 and coming all around. And the thing about a lap here to qualify well at Road Atlanta, you really do need to be in that comfort zone to be able to push. You need all the tyre temperature you can muster, because those tyres need to be fully rubbered in, they need to be up to temperature, and then you've got to be able to carry the speed from corner to corner. And that last aspect is you need to find the toe. Put it all together and you could be on pole by a sizable margin, not necessarily 6.5 tenths, but it could be at least 2 to 3 tenths. That'll be the difference come the end of the lap as Wade makes his way through the right-hand return. Number 10's gone to his first flying lap. Of course, we'll jump on with our drivers after they've completed their first flying lap, so that way you get to see a lap that is up to temperature in terms of the brakes and the tyres. But as Wade heads on round, meanwhile, we do look to Daniel Tufts, and well, as we see the number 34 driver coming through at turn number 5 into 6. One to watch out for in that midfield, as we said earlier, really has proven to be one of those drivers who's able to nip at the heels of the top 10 on a regular basis. Well, he's fallen a little bit further behind in comparison to where his peers are out on circuit at the moment. And as you can see from the circuit map in the top right corner of your screen, we do have a long trail of drivers making their way on around. As we continue to see here, Tufts heading on through, but we also do have another driver who's making their debut to the series today, and that is Sebastian Holmichael. And well, we're going to very shortly load their data into the broadcast. And well, we do apologise, ladies and gentlemen, if you do see the overlay refresh itself in a brief moment, and that is because of the fact we are loading the driver data for Holmichael, and therefore that's why we do have that brief intermittent glitch. But still, as our drivers continue to charge around here and get their first laps on the board, it is going to be a very close session here, and we do has some relatively cool conditions for our drivers, which really has also been the theme of the session so far, in the fact we have not seen any exceptional temperatures for our drivers, and that's why it's worked out quite nicely in these qualifying sessions. They're able to push as much as they want and so desire, but as we do see now what is there, Tufts heading on through it, and I believe we have had that overlay refresh. Well, Tufts loses the rear of the car coming through turn 5, 6, and he just catches it to avoid the wall and a reset to the pit lane. Meanwhile, we look to drivers who've got their first lap times coming on in, and it's a 105.878, which is the fastest so far by 400s over Geoff Randall. Randall still right behind Wade as they make the way on through, but meanwhile, we talked about our debutant of Hall Michael, and here he comes through the final corner. We jump on board with him as he takes us around for a lap of the Road Atlanta short course. Making his way across the timeline and starting to head up through the speed range up to turn 1 and braking there down to 4th gear, coming into the apex at 92 miles an hour and heading uphill from turn 1 into turn 2. As he brings his way into the turn 2 left-hander onto the brakes, it wears turn 3, then Sonny emerges, but he's had to brake already down to 3rd gear and now bringing the car downhill further through turn number 4 flat out before bouncing the throttle through the Esses sequence here. No numbered corners, he goes up into 5th gear to help stabilise the car, and now into turn 5, the long right hand, he drops the gear, lifts off the throttle and just carries the momentum through, feels the nose bite in, and he gets back onto the throttle immediately as he heads through 6 and down towards the chicanes at turn 7 and 8. Shorten the run as much as possible as he hits the rev limiter there briefly, and now coming down towards the braking zone for turn 7 and 8, looking to his right hand side there for the 50 board, and coming down to 2nd gear, the slice paracours on the circuit as he straight lines the 2 apexes, connects them nicely, and heading over the rise of 9, and now down into the 4 into turn number 10, flat out all the way here up to 4th gear, will upshift to 5th as late as possible as he comes on through to complete the lap, and that is a lap of the Road Atlanta short course as brought to you by Sebastian Hall Michael as he makes his way up towards turn number 1 once again, and that's a 106.768, which puts him P17 so far, but as he heads on through and up towards turns 2 and 3 once more, we do give you a quick indication of the weather here today, and you can see ambient temperature at 90 degrees centigrade and a track temperature at 21 degrees centigrade. Clear skies, so we are expecting that track temperature to gradually rise as the race day goes on, but we're not expecting those temperatures to be too tricky for our drivers to navigate in terms of tyre compound. And again, we have seen that so many times this season so far, where the ambient and the track temperature, they come up gradually over the course of the day, but nothing excessive, and therefore the car really does feel comfortable over the entire duration of the racing, whether it is in the sprint or indeed the feature. But as we do clear the weather from your screen for a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen, and we can see Sebastian Hall Michael continuing his way on down. Well, meanwhile, one driver yet to get a time on the board, Paolo Anzioso, but as he heads out to the chicane, will it be this time that he's able to successfully set a time? We've also got Ryan Walker who's in the pit lane yet to get a time on the board. As Anzioso crosses the timeline, what's it going to be here? Well, it is going to be a valid lap, we believe. No, it's not, in fact, and he's still looking to get a lap on the board. Meanwhile, jumping up to P5 is Roddy van der Meerden as we see a 105.774, and he is continuing to right now really hunt down the top portion of the grid, albeit you can see there at the top of the standings, Cristian Pérez on a 105.060, albeit Nathan Wade's just jumped to within 400, so we're about to say that he was currently 6/10 faster, but Wade has found a lap. As meanwhile, we do get a quick refresh of our overlay there, and apologies for that. It will do that every so often as driver data continues to load, but as we see it, van der Meerden making his way through turns 5 and 6, well, right now he'll feel as though he's got a little bit more to do, but he is at the head of a pack of drivers who are currently 7/10 off of the pole lap, and we see Neil Gardner jump up into P3, and as he comes on through the right-hander in the number 74, Gardner here definitely looking strong, and I think for Gardner this may just be a little bit of momentum boost this campaign, in the fact we are almost halfway through this qualifying session, and now that gap between Perez and the rest of the field is starting to close up very gradually indeed. But coming on down the hill and in towards turn at number 5 he goes. Will for Gardner at this point finding that extra 3/10 to potentially put himself on pole. That comes down to more about taking all the fuel out of the car, getting a perfect lap in terms of where you hit your apexes, and also getting the perfect slipstream over the entirety of the lap. As meanwhile we do look to what is Remco Placer as he makes his way out of turn 6 and down towards 7 and 8 in the 7-up machine, and head down towards the braking zone here for RT Racing, I do believe. And I say the 7-up machine is running very similar colours to 7-up, albeit I don't think it's sponsored by the drinks company there, but the colours similar as he makes his way on through and down towards turn at number 10. And as he comes through the right-hander here on 1.2 seconds currently off of Cristian Pérez's pole lap, will he be able to improve this time around? I don't think so. No, he does not. He has to go once again. But meanwhile, one driver who is improving as he heads across the timeline, he went purple in Sector 2. He improved in Sector 3 compared to his previous pairs. It is Rasmus Vuori, the flying Finn, who goes within 1.5 tenths now of Pérez's pole lap, but nobody quite able to change it yet. But look at this from Nathan Wade, meanwhile, heading on down the hill, and Wade tucked in behind Geoff Randall. The two of them working together here, doing a little bit of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours with regards to slipstream sharing. But Wade there goes a little bit wide, coming out to turn 8, down into 9.10. But he's on purple for subsector 2. He's gone personal best in sector 1, and as he heads to the line, it's going to improve in sector 3, but is it a valid lap? It is, and it's 1.5 tenths faster. It's the first 104 of the session. It's a 104.905, and Nathan Wade takes provisional pole, but heading up the hill and in towards turns 2, 3. Meanwhile, we take a look back to Tim Bertie and his debut, and right now currently P at 22 on an out lap here in what's the number 12 car, and heading on through turns 5 and 6 and looking to find a little bit more time. And you can see there, with regards to how the times are separated, it is less than a second between P1 and P15, and that means if somebody's able to put together a near perfect lap, they'll jump on many a place. And speaking of a near perfect lap, Cristian Pérez almost setting a perfect lap, but missing out by 2 thousandths versus Nathan Wade's pole lap on a 104.907, the second 104 that we've seen here today. And we still got plenty of time in this qualifying session, and I think we could see plenty more from our drivers as we very shortly jump on board with Tim Bertie for an on-board lap. Making his way out of the final corner, and well, in fact, they're coming off of race tonight and trying to get a bit more tyre temperature, and Bertie really struggling here in this qualifying session at the moment as he comes through turn at number 1, hitting the apex at 91 miles an hour, and coming up the hill into turns 2 and 3. I think as he breaks his way into turn 3 by 2, you can see that the car sliding through very comfortably, bringing the car down the hill through turn 4 and into the Esses. And as he goes right, left, right, it's all going to be about keeping the composure of the car, keeping it steady and making sure the body roll does not come out of control as he comes through 5 into 6 very gradually. He's going to have a little bit of traffic in front, but he'll stay to the right here as it does look as though that is Vendemaiden who steers clear. And as they come down towards turn at 7 and 8 now, Bertie on the charge here in 5th gear, in top gear. These cars having a 5-speed gearbox and heading on to the brakes very shortly. Braking at just before the 50-metre mark, come through the left into right, goes a little bit deep there. The understeer catch him out and almost translates into oversteer as he tries to correct the car as he comes over the rise of 9 and down into 10. Well, it's been a relatively smooth lap for Bertie, but not the lap he's necessarily wants. He's not improved in sectors 1 and 2, and he goes on to another lap here, but definitely a lot still to be found for the debutant on a 107.718 there. His previous best a 106.56, but as he heads through turn at number 1. Meanwhile, we look back up to your current pole sitter of Nathan Wade, and we can see him here heading up the hill for a turn at number 1 in the number 5 car. Randall tucked in behind, and also one driver has recently jumped up into P6. Mark Beckhouse in the number 11 KTM privateer machine as he comes into turn number 3, sliding on down there. Almost looks like he's going to fall off the circuit from that camera angle, but he's in full control of the car, and it is now only a 5 tenths between him and Wade's pole lap. But again, look at the lap times. We're now down to P18, is less than a second off a pole. And speaking of pole, we've had a change of pole sitter. Cristian Pérez goes pole position, provisional currently by 1 tenth over Nathan Wade, a 104.792. We've got 4 minutes left in this qualifying session and no overtime to speak of. So everybody right now running out of time, running out of fuel in the cars, and the track really being rubbered in here. And this means for most drivers now, the track is in its prime condition for them to be able to go full attack with regards to those laps. So we could see further changes, as I believe that's Van den Bergen and Neil Gardner both off track. And well, in fact, what on earth has happened there, as I think both drivers getting caught up in a little bit of an instant together. Well, Gardner's returned to the pit lane, and meanwhile Van den Bergen's carrying on out of the circuit. We stay focused here on Pérez as he heads on down. That's the 24 car going past us, Rasmus Vuori in fact, and as Vuori takes our cameraman's attention, we're currently in P3 in 4 attempts of a pole position and looking to try and find a bit more time as he makes his way down towards turn number 10. And well, has he improved on this lap? He's improved in sectors 1 and 2. I think this is going to be an over improvement for him as he crosses the line. He goes P2 and he's only now 800ths off of Pérez's pole lap, and with Wade only a further 300ths off here, we have a three-way fight for pole. There's no question about it, albeit now Vuori's going to be giving Pérez the tow as Van den Bergen's coming into the pit lane. And well, there's only a couple more laps left for our drivers here, and we do look to Titus de Jong, who currently down in P17, the RT Racing driver. He's a little bit further down the field compared to his teammate as he makes his way up towards turn number 7 and 8 here. Onto the brakes he goes in the number 90 car. I think he'll recognise that qualifying is only one part of the day, and there's still plenty more to go. But as he comes through the left into right, we do say thank you there to Zaudi for dropping a subscription to the YouTube channel. And indeed, if you want to tune into live broadcasting week in, week out, including what is the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, then feel free to subscribe on YouTube, or at least give the video a like if you're enjoying it tonight. But as we do see it, Titus Young heading into turn number 1, running his way through the right hand and improves to P14 on 105.624, getting the toe there off of the 92. And as AJ Campbell gives him the benefit there, we look to Campbell currently P18. And this is the nasty part of qualifying, of course, and the fact that all these drivers do have a lot of respect to one another. They all know one another, and of course, when they do have a newcomer join the series, they always welcome them with open arms. But because everybody knows each other, therefore it does really become these mutual little relationships in qualifying. And you also see in the race, to be fair, at points where everybody knows how much room to give one another, and when they're giving the toe to a driver, when a driver's giving the toe to them, and that they'll be able to swap things around. And now when we're coming to that crunch point, it's about being the driver who picks up the toe at the right time. And speaking of picking things up at the right time, Perez has improved that pole lap now to a 104.762. Vuori is only 300ths faster than Wade, but as we see here, Campbell having a bit of a slow run off the apex of turn 8, with a little bit of a poor approach to turn 8, going a bit deep. He's going to open the door up to his driver behind of de Jong as they head to the line. Both drivers crossing there, and well, Titus de Jong moves to P13. Meanwhile, we see more lap times coming in. Enzo Canta, keep your eyes on Canta, and the fact that he absolutely put himself out there in Mount Panorama in terms of the pace he was showing in the race and qualifying. He's currently P5, but he does have a couple of drivers behind him who are trying to leech a little bit of slipstream off of him as he makes his way down through the Esses. And as he heads up towards turn number 5 here, I think he's going to be running out of opportunities to improve. He is 4 tenths or 4.5 tenths off of the pole lap, and I think the third row of the grid will be the best he can achieve unless he finds an extra 100th versus Tufts. Well, if he does find that, he'll be on to the second row in P4, and Jackson the same. And right now, Ryan Jackson and Cantor shared the same lap time down to the 1,000th. It is the 10,000th that separates the two of them, but it gets a little bit crowded there through the chicane. I think a bit of misunderstanding in terms of who's giving the toe to whom. As meanwhile, Rudy van der Meeden jumps up to P4 from P17. He's put it in very late in the day. And as our drivers make the way on around here, we do see where's Terry McGrath across the line in the 888 machine. And does he improve? He does not. But Rudy van der Meeden has moved up to P4, waits in the pit lane, so he can't improve from P3. But of course, when we hit the 15 minutes, everybody will be taken off the circuit into the pit lane. There's no overtime. Perez is into the pits. Palacio moves up to P10 on 105.297. Wayne improves to a 106.293 at P23. But have we got any more times coming around? I don't think so, ladies and gentlemen. The clock strikes 15 minutes, and that is all we've got for qualifying. It's Cristian Pérez who takes pole position. So as they make their way to the grid for our first race of the day, this is how they line up for the round 7 sprint of the 2023 Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, sponsored by Musical Money. Cristian Pérez takes pole position for Astro Racing by a 10th over Rasmus Vuori, the privateer. Behind them on row 2, it's the combination of Nathan Wade and STN's Rudy van der Meeden, with Daniel Tuff started off our third row and joined by fellow privateer Enzo Canta in P6. P7, P8, it's the combination of Ryan Jackson and Sickhead Races Gordon van den Bergen, with row at 5 being completed by Nick Vaughan Roberts and RT Racing's Remco Placier. Outside the top 10, we have Mark Beckhouse for Speed World Academy, joined by Geoff Randall for Gone Skipping Racing in one of his weakest qualifying sessions of the season for Randall. This is the first time, in fact, he's qualified outside the top 10. And as we then look to row at number 7 on the grid, it's Neil Garner and JT Kopinen, followed up on row number 8 by Titus de Jong and Juan Rodriguez. On row number 9, we have Terry McGrath and Team Bertie line up together. Bertie put in a good qualifying session on his debut for Sim RC. And there's AJ Campbell for Artel Motorsport, joined by Sebastian Holmichael, who complete the top 20 on row number 10. On row 11, it Skips Races Kevin Budgeon, joined by Artel Motorsport Blues Paolo Anzioso, with Chris Wayne from Gone Skipping Racing qualifying P23, and joined on the 12th row of the grid by Nigel Easy. And as we come to the end of the grid, it's Ryan Walker who'll be starting last but not least, P25 there, not able to set a lap, I do believe, potentially due to technical issues with the car, and hopefully he'll be able to make it to the grid, so that way have all 25 starters and make it off the line. But that is the grid for your first race of the day, ladies and gentlemen, as everybody gets ready to go racing here. Well, it is definitely going to be quite the rush to turn at number 1, but we do have only what is excuse me, 30 seconds or so left before we do go racing. We've only got a couple of spots left on this grid as we see Rasmus Vuori there by his lonesome on the front row. We're waiting for Cristian Pérez to take his slot, and we do have Nick Vaughan Roberts and Kevin Bergen yet to take their slots. Ryan Walker will be starting for the back of the grid. You can see him there in the top left corner of your screen in the white and red machine, so not setting a qualifying lap, but they've been able to get the car repaired. But we do look to Cristian Pérez, who takes his slot. The gridding process is complete. We await the lights. 1 red light, 2 red lights, 3 red lights, 4 red lights, 5 red lights. And it's lights out and away we go for race 1 of the day. Cristian Pérez gets us underway in the run to turn number 1. It's a good start for Pérez, but meanwhile Vuori gets a good run up through the gearbox here as they head towards turn 1. And meanwhile look at Wade. Wade's at the best start of the 3 of them as they head into the opening corner. And as they go, well, Vuori's going to immediately give the space up and Wade moves into P2. But meanwhile behind, Rudy van der Meyden stays in P4 and holds off Daniel Tufts as they come into the Esses for the first time by turns 2 and 3. But charging away on down the hill, of course the complexion now will be that everyone will go line astern here, rolling away through the Esses in the long charge on down. Meanwhile further back we see Remco Pleiser gain a little bit of ground, gaining 1 place versus Geoff Randall off the line, and Randall gaining 2. But as they come up towards turns 5 and 6, now it's all about the flow through the long right hander and keeping your composure, cold tyres and cold brakes as they head on through and up towards turns 6, 7 and 8. But down in towards the chicane they go, and as they break the way on down, well, we look to Pérez here under pressure from Wade. But meanwhile behind you can see already we're starting to get 2 and 3 wide moments, including Neil Gardner looking up the inside here versus Mark Beckhouse. Beckhouse losing the place to Gardner, and as Gardner takes the position now, it's going to be JT Kopinen who looks to move over the rise and down into turn number 10. As they complete the first lap and go on to lap number 2, it's Cristian Pérez who leads after 1 lap ahead of Nathan Wade P2, Rasmus Vuori P3 ahead of Rudy van der Meyden P4, Daniel Tufts P5, Enzo Canta P6, followed up by Brian Jackson P7, Gordon van den Bergen P8, Remco Pleiser P9, Geoff Randall P10, and Neil Garner best the rest in P11. They're getting 2 places off the line as they make the way into turns 2 3 this time around and down. Well, everybody carries on the momentum here and everyone keeping their cool and composure as they get ready to battle into the next sequence of corners. Meanwhile a bit further down the order, Juan Rodriguez is gaining places gradually. He gained 1 place on the open lap. Now looking to gain another place at Firebird Sim Racing as he chases after Tim McGrath in the battle for P14. But as they come through turns 5 and 6, and meanwhile up the road we're hearing that Gordon van der Bergen has lost out to Enzo Canta, but has taken the place of Remco Pleiser in return. And in fact it's Ryan Jackson who's losing the place to Plenty as we look to the battle for P6. Pleiser on the outside, Jackson backs off there, and everybody right now treating this almost like it's proverbial NASCAR in the terms of the fact that as soon as somebody gets side by side they're backing out immediately, and nobody right now wants to put up too much of a fight because they'll lose the run to the cars in front. But meanwhile as they make their way down through turn number 10 and on towards the next lap, we look a bit further back to Ryan Walker, the driver of course we talked about not setting a qualifying lap, and he's moved up 4 places already from the back of the pack to P21. And we did have one driver who didn't make the starting procedure in the form of Nick Vaughan Roberts, but he's currently in P23 and trying to carry on his way up the road as we see Ryan Walker making his way into turn number 1 once again. But as he comes up the hill, we look a little bit further in front of him. Paolo Anzioso having to go defensive versus Chris Wayne, as Wayne under pressure right now to try and push forward with Nigel Easy not too far off. And Anzioso holding on here for Arto Motorsport Blue in P18 as they head on down the hill and towards turn at number 5. Ryan Walker's just passed Nigel Easy. Easy getting it wrong through turns 2, 3 and 4, and therefore picking up another place. Meanwhile, we look back up to at the top of the field, and we don't currently, in fact, as Anzioso goes a little bit deep, and therefore Wayne's going to look up the inside and take P18 quite comfortably there. Anzioso just tripping himself up on the run through 5, 6, and Walker now getting close as well. And Ryan Walker looking to take another place in the number 8 car. The private it up the inside, goes all in on the brakes here, and Walker definitely right now charging through the order as he comes on through 7, 8, up towards 9 and 10. Goes a little bit wide, but he'll keep it in good stead as he makes his way down the hill and onto another lap. But meanwhile, we look from them back inside the top 10, and we look to Daniel Tufts, who right now holding on to P4. He has Rudy van der Meyden right behind him. And van der Meyden is continuing to try and put pressure on as they head up towards turns 2, 3 and 4. But you can see that Rasmus Vuori, Nathan Wade and Cristian Pérez, your top 3, not creeping away at all as we ride on board with our P4 driver. Now making his way all the way down through the Esses here, trying to take a nice early apex with a dirty air off the cars in front, disrupting the aerodynamic approach of the car. And as he makes his way through 5 and 6, we see a small moment there for Wade, almost losing the rear of the car, just stepping out slightly, oversteer creeping in. With that anti-roll bar, of course, I just want it as loose as possible so that way they can rotate the car. But of course, when they make it as loose as they possibly can, the car becomes very sensitive to oversteer, and Wade almost ended up in the inside wall coming through turns 5 and 6, but not to be. But as Tufts makes his way over the apex of turn number 8, He'll save that bit of knowledge in his mind from the fact that if Wade is pushed hard enough, he may be pushed into a mistake. And as they come down through turn number 10 right now, we can see there Dan Schuring saying go Brody in reference to Brody Van der Meyden. And indeed, as we look to the gearbox now, Daniel Tufts, that is the aforementioned Van der Meyden behind as they make their way through turn number 1 this time in the battle for P4. Van der Meyden P5, of course, and gaining places quite rapidly qualifying. Lost a place versus Daniel Tufts at the start of this race, but he's keeping well in track here in the battle to be inside the top 5, if not hunting for a podium place. But as they make their way down into the S's this time around, meanwhile we look a little bit further back to Terry McGrath, and McGrath here finds himself between a rock and a hard place with Juan Rodriguez behind him, and meanwhile JT Coppinon in front of him in the battle for P at 13, and Renko Pleister in P12 almost being pulled into this battle as they come through 5-6. But again, as the drivers slide their way through turns 5 and 6, it almost looks like they're not going to make the corner. They're drifting on through, but that's the way the car does approach the corner, the amount of speed they're carrying. And of course our drivers here balance the car with counter steer where needed, but down the hill they go. And meanwhile Neil Garner having to go defensive versus Mark Beckhouse, as Beckhouse looking around the outside for P10, he can't quite find it. And meanwhile behind we see Remco Pleister, McGrath, Coppinon and Rodriguez exactly as they were previously, but as they make the way over the rise and down into turn number 10. Meanwhile just in front of them we do see it's all starting to kick off in the battle for P5 with Canta holding off at West Gordon Vandenbergen under pressure, and Randall as Randall looks up the inside. Randall going all into turn 1. There's contact between the two, and Vandenbergen and Randall are both off and to the tyre barrier. Turn number 1 is a disaster for the pair, and that's going to drop them a long way out of the order. As meanwhile we look back up to Canta, who after all that can now start to step away, and the Italian here now chasing after Daniel Tufts. He'll be feeling confident here that he can press on and start to hunt down a potential podium finish. As they make the way through turns 5 and 6 this time around, a little bit of wobble there, and I think just a little bit of a mind reset he'll have to go through, as Randall having to be towed to the pits and Vandenbergen the same. Both drivers coming off worse for wear. Meanwhile we look back up to your race leader of Cristian Pérez, and the Astro Racing driver here with Wade cutting on past there, and Nathan Wade being given the opportunity to change places. These two working together to try and break away. Indeed, this top 4 right now, I think, all trying to keep things in the status quo in terms of let's just work together and make sure the fight for the win comes down to the 4 of us, rather than having other belligerents join in, because you can see that the gap to Canta is currently 1 second, but that gap is closing as we're hearing that Beckhouse and also Budgen are both in the pit lane due to damage picked up. Meanwhile, Perez there on the inside defending versus, in fact on the outside defending versus Rasmus Vuori, who goes inside to outside up the hill, but Perez will have the run. But of course this battling, even the smallest shade to it, will start to open up that gap to Wade, and that's something they cannot afford, because if Wade is given the opportunity to break away, he will most definitely take it and run off into the distance before we get to the time at the end of this race. But meanwhile, as we do look from them back to Juan Rodriguez, well, Rodriguez has gained a few places, gained 6 so far, up to P10 overall. And of course steering clear of some major incidents early on in this race. And speaking of incidents, we do have the opportunity very shortly to give you a replays of a couple of incidents that have occurred, starting off with some difficulties for Tim Bertie on his race start. But we see Rodriguez here trying to set up the run down towards turn 7 and 8 versus McGrath. McGrath in the Triple H just holding firm there, and Rodriguez not able to look for the move. And indeed we have the replay now of what happened to Tim Bertie at the start of the race. As he made his way through the Esses into turn number 5. Oh goodness me, I think there just having to catch the car, given the fact he was in the inside of another driver and bouncing on the escape road. But for Tim Bertie surviving that could have been a very difficult and a fatal one to his racing ambitions in this first race of the day, but it was not so. But thank goodness for that, he was able to steer it clear of the wall. But definitely that car has had its suspension rocked, there is no question about it. But meanwhile on lap number 2 we also had an incident for Kevin Budgen, and this is what happened to the number 18 driver. Making his way through the Esses into turn 5 here, carries quite a bit of speed. Rear of the car starts to let go, he turns the wheel the other way and it goes round, and in the end a bit of contact there. I think that's Paolo Anzioso making contact on the wheel rim, but Budgen turning the car on around. It didn't quite upset or end his race, but still a difficult one for the Skips Racing driver. As we return to your live pictures now, and as we do, we look back to the battle here for P7, in fact P8, and that is between Neil Garner and McGrath. McGrath up the inside of Gardner, meanwhile behind Rodriguez trying to get into this fight as well. Live pictures currently on screen as they make their way through turn 7 and 8, down towards turn 9 and 10. But we do look to see how Rodriguez could potentially weave his way into this battle, as McGrath meanwhile holding firm in P8, and the Scotsman here, with Gardner looking very fierce on the run out of turn 10. It's going to be 3 wide. Rodriguez is going to go for it here all the way through on the inside to make it 2 places in the space of 1 corner. He gets 1 as Garner backs off, but McGrath here in the middle of the road going into the corner doesn't back back out on the exit. He holds the inside line into 2. He'll be outside to 3, but Rodriguez in the end is forced to back off, and McGrowther, well, he makes sure there that he capitalises on the places, and Rodriguez, being the opportunist, he went for it. He managed to do half the job, but not the other half, and now he's trying to batter on down the door that McGrowther's presenting for the simple reason here he wants the place. I think he feels like he's got the pace to go hunting after Vendemeda, who's up in P7. But as they come through 5, 6, and down towards turn 7 and 8 they go. You can see that Rodriguez on the outside here. McGrowther covering him off in the middle of the road. I think this might be for Rodriguez to try and go all the way around the outside. It's possible here into the chicane. He's going to go for it under brake, and McGrowther really goes deep there. Contact between the two of them, and Rodriguez is made to back off as they rub wheels and as they make their way out of 7, 8, down towards 9 and 10. Now Garner will try and seize on the opportunity and look behind, and you can see JT Kopinen and also what is their Remco Pleister all queuing up here and wanting to take shots at Rodriguez. As Gardner gets 1 place, he's now going to try and gain 2 as he makes his way into turn number 1, going on to what Pim is lap number 10 under race conditions. As he comes on through, there was no response from McGrowther other to let it go, and I think McGrowther may have had a little bit of a heart-stopping moment there with regards to that contact with Rodriguez, and therefore has let it go this time, but will look to bounce back versus Gardner shortly. Meanwhile, Kopinen under pressure by Remco Pleister as the RT Racing driver there stays close to the rear of the vid, and as we continue to look at the Finnish driver of Kopinen making his way through the Esses here, through the right-hander he goes to turn number 5, and everything calms down for a brief moment. Meanwhile, we look back up to your race leaders, and well, this is Pérez versus Wade, and Wade on the inside, Pérez on the outside, and this time Wade gives up the lead of the race to Pérez. But of course, when's it going to be? And they'll start to get the proverbial boxing gloves out and start to fight harder for the places here. Well, Pérez, I think, there trying to push on and hard coming out of turns 7 and 8, but in the end going wide, and therefore Wade's going to take the place back. But Pérez now started, I think, to turn it up a notch and finding the limits there very quickly indeed as they make their way on to the next lap. But charging on down, this top 4 now is 2.2 seconds clear of Enzo Canta in P5, so they have started to give themselves that proverbial buffer where they could go hunting one another on the final few laps of this race. But meanwhile, we look back to JT Kopinen as he heads into turn number 1. Side by side with Place here as we jump on board here with the Finn, and in towards the braking zone he goes for turn 2. It's going to be close here. He's still got Placer on his inside. There's contact there between Gardner and Woods. I do believe, well, not sure who the contact was with. I think it was with McGrowther, but as they made their way down through the S's there, it was Rodriguez who had to back out in response. Gardner's return just in front of Kopinen, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kopinen may be absolutely furious at the fact that he's just lost out. Meanwhile, Alonso has jumped up 3 places in the space of the first half of this lap. They made their way down towards turn 7 and 8 here. It's going to be inside for Kopinen versus Gardner on the outside. He's going to try and get a nose ahead here. Meanwhile, in front you can see Placer versus Rodriguez. Rodriguez up the inside. Well, Gardner's going to try and go around the outside. Kopinen gives him the space as they make their way through, but in the end Gardner gets it wrong. And in return, now Kopinen moves up to P11 as he chases after Placer in P10. Cantos into the pit lane. We believe that may be due to damage to the car as they charge away through turns 10 and up towards 1 they go once again, with the drivers here all flying on through it. And meanwhile, look at this, Sebastian Holmichael's now getting involved, and so is Nick Vaughan Roberts as they come on through. We can see Holmichael backs it off there slightly as he heads up the hill, and meanwhile now Vaughan Roberts also there. It's going to be side by side between the two of them, and Roberts in the end gets ahead as they make the way through turns 2, 3 and into 4. Chris Wayne also catching up to this. A lot of late gainers in this race, drivers who started from just towards the end of the top 20 and now finding the places. Holmichael starting exactly in P20 and now into P13, but as he comes to the right hander here of turn 5 and 6, trying to make further ground. But meanwhile, we look back up to Rodriguez, who's trying to make the move to get to the head of this pack, and that is up the inside of McGrowther. McGrowther, of course, gaining 10 places since the start of the race. Rodriguez 8, and well, will we see the statistics change shortly? We'll place up the inside. It's 3 wide. There's contact between Rodriguez and McGrowther, but look at the move from Remco Pleister. Literally says, right, if you two are done dawdling, I'm going to go all in on this, and that is an absolutely beautiful move from the RT Racing driver. And let's take another look back at that, because I don't think we saw enough of it. As he looked down on the inside here, he saw that two of them were battling and went, right, we're going to make it 3 wide here, went all in on the brakes. McGrowther turns in to find Rodriguez cannot turn in, given that Pleister is there, and in the end McGrowther and Rodriguez come to blows, and Remco Pleister simply says, and that's the Dutch way of doing things, as he makes his way down through 9 and 10 and gets it done absolutely beautifully. But as we return to the live pictures here, meanwhile, looking up to the very front of the field once again, with similar situation. You may be getting a little bit of deja vu here, but I can definitely assure you right now, it's the calm before the storm between Wade and Pérez as they make their way down towards the braking zone for the chicane. And looking on behind there, Daniel Tufts in P4, looking up the inside of Rasmus Vuori, goes all in. A little bit of a rub between the tyres there of the two drivers, and as they make the way out, Rasmus Vuori holds the position for now, but coming down through 9 and into 10. Tuff's definitely started to show his hand, but he goes a little bit wide there. Catches the car just in time, but that could have been absolutely disastrous for the Briton as he brings it back together, but still in P4 here, trying to push on. Meanwhile, Rudy Vandermeiden down in P5 with, what was that, pit stop for Canto, and as they make the way onwards towards turns 1, you can see the STN driver now has the company of Ryan Jackson, and Jackson's had a bit of a quiet race, so has Rudy Vandermeiden after those early gains, but the two of them here together now and battling for the final spot inside the top 5. But meanwhile, it's all blows here further back, and of course it's critical here for JT Kopina because he's not just battling for P10 in this race, he's battling for a reverse grid pole. Up the inside there of Place, who drops down to P10, and meanwhile behind you can see it, it's Vaughan Roberts versus Neil Gardner as the two yellow machines make their way side by side for the Esses. Vaughan Roberts meanwhile stays off circuit there briefly as they make the way on through. 2 wide just does not work there. They're not willing to give ground. 5 minutes left in this race, we've still got plenty to go, and Vaughan Roberts used up one of his 9 lives if he was a cat, making his way down towards 7-8 at the moment. With that off track there, it could have been far, far worse, but it wasn't to be as he heads up towards turn 7-8 once again. We're coming on down and in towards the braking zone here. You see right now staying close and in contact. Indeed, not out of the hunt at any point so far as they make the way down through 9-10 and in towards turn number 1 and once again. But meanwhile, we look back to the battle for P5 here. Rudy Vandermeiden versus Ryan Jackson, and these two, I think, now really started to square up against one another. Jackson ever so close, but he can't quite find the move at the moment. Meanwhile, looking back to McGrauther, who's holding on to P7. He's holding off Rodriguez, but he can't break away. Redco Palacio P9 by comparison has got what is there, JT Kopinen behind him, and Palacio Kopinen will not want to battle too hard because of course they'll be wary of the fact they'll be starting on the front row of the grid in the feature race, the fixed fish as they currently stand, and they'll want to try and keep Gardner, Michael and Nick Vaughan Roberts behind them as they make their way in towards turn number 5 very shortly. But I can assure you that Michael, Vaughan Roberts and also Gardner will have other ideas in terms of wanting to be in P10 as a minimum by the end of this race. But further back we've also got AJ Campbell, who's trying to put some pressure on Brian Walker here for P16, and Brian Walker, after making those early gains, he's gained 9 places overall. Well, now he's trying to hold on to those positions he's gained versus Campbell, who's definitely showing he's got the pace there to take the fight as they make their way down towards the chicane for what is going to be a limited number of times remaining. In fact, after this lap they'll be going on to what will be 3 laps remaining, as meanwhile we look back up to what is your race leaders here in the form of Nathan Wade versus Pérez behind, right on board the gearbox here of the number 5 privateer. And coming on through 3 and into 4, you can see there a little bit of a wobble on the curve, just putting 2 wheels onto the dirt. He catches it just in time, but that's now how hard he's being made to push as the Astro Racing machine continues to probe. It continues to look sharp and fast as they head on through turn number 5, and Wade absolutely fighting at the bit with the car here, squirming on the wheels, screeching on the tyres, and as they make their way down towards turn number 7 and 8, well, it's going to be 3 wide here. Remco Pleiser made it work earlier, and now it's going to be Rasmus Vuori who tries to make it work on the inside. Onto the brakes they go, and Wade there on the outside. Pérez defends in the middle of the road, and Vuori does not find a way on through, but as they make their way out to turn 7 and 8 and down towards 9 and 10, well, you can imagine now that Wade's going to have to worry about the fact he's got growing pressure from behind, and Pérez here could use that to his advantage. Coming up towards turn number 1, we do say hello there to Adam Miles in the YouTube chat, who wishes he could be racing, and we do miss you, Adam, but we hope to see you out of circuit in a week's time. But Wade here holding on for now, but I think for Pérez it's all about doing everything right in terms of just defending a little bit more and forcing these battles to come to fruition as they come through turns 3, 4 and once again into the S's they proceed. Meanwhile, further behind we see here in the battle in the second major pack, Redco Pleiser hold on to P8, it's 3-8 wide behind, it's Gardner versus Rodriguez and Vaughan Roberts, and oh goodness me, it's all unfolding as Gardner is given a tap, and meanwhile Rodriguez ends up off onto the grass, and I think there's a bit more there we need to unpack as Chris Wayne's also coming through, but one Rodriguez it's all gone horribly wrong for. But meanwhile, as we look from there back to Remco Pleiser, he's just stayed clear of all this, holding on to P8 currently, and in fact we do have an opportunity to get a quick replay of what exactly happened. This is from one Rodriguez's perspective. So battling side by side here, and there was contact between himself and JT Kopinen, and into Gardner as well coming across the road, and for Rodriguez it all unfolded very quickly. I don't think he recognised what happened. Meanwhile, we looked at what was from Pleiser's perspective, looking from the gearbox, and this is where you'll see it all comes together. Well, I think Kopinen cut across there with Gardner in front of him, and that is how it all unfolded. But meanwhile, we return to live pictures, ladies and gentlemen, at 1 minute remaining. Pleister holds on to P8. Meanwhile, we look back to your race leaders here. They are on the penultimate lap, and Pérez leads to Astro Racing ahead of Rasmus Vuori, with Nathan Wade in at P3 ahead of Daniel Tufts. It's a four-way fight for the win, and we'll stay with this battle all the way to the end now, barring any exceptions. And Pérez doing everything right so far. He's done this right every corner of every lap to date, but still, one more lap awaits after this one. And Rasmus Vuori right now looking very sharp as they head on down. It's going to be 3 wide once again. Wade's going to look for it all in, but in the end he does decide to back out and recognises there's one more lap to go. Vuori looks around the outside, and Pérez is given a tap on the rear, and Pérez falls to the gravel coming out of turn 7. As that tap there sees Rasmus Vuori take the lead in this race. But now look at Daniel Tufts. Tufts has seen it coming and looks up the inside as they come through 9 and 10. And Daniel Tufts leads as they make the way to the final lap. White flag waving, and as they charge their way into turn number 1. Well, Vuori's going to be on the outside here, and Wade's got to really pick his point to overtake, given how close this will be. Tufts here's got Vuori now carrying the momentum all the way through. And Rasmus Vuori is not letting what happened at turn 7 prevent him from going racing as they make the way through 2 and 3. And Vuori gets it inside to outside, just catches the car in time, and Rasmus Vuori retakes the lead of this race. And the Finn right now holding on as they come into the Esses. Down they go. Wade's just waiting in the background. He'll look for the run off of turn number 5 into 6. It's going to be such a critical run as they'll look to go 3 wide in the run to the chicane. And Wade's going to want to position himself as best as possible. Rasmus Vuori now needs to decide where will he put the car. It's going to be on the outside here as Tufts looks to the inside. He's going to gradually creep it alongside. Wade tucks in behind the pair, and as they break the way on down here, well, it's going to be Tufts who looks at a move. Vuori defends outside to inside. It's very close between the two of them, but he makes it count. Wade looks at the cutback here as they head over the rise and down, and as they head into the final corner, Wade gets ahead of Tufts, but Rasmus Vuori stays at the front of the field. They come through the right-hander. The checker flag waves. Wade goes for it, but he's not going to have enough of a run, and it's Rasmus Vuori who takes the win ahead of Wade in P2, and Daniel Tufts completes the podium there P3. It'll then be Cristian Pérez P4 ahead of Ryan Jackson P5, Rudy van der Meeden P6, Terry McGrauther holds on to P7 at the line ahead of Remco Pleister with Neil Garner P9. Nick Vaughan Roberts takes P10, and with that pole position for the feature race, it'll be Sebastian Holmichael P11, best the rest ahead of JT Capinen P12, Juan Rodriguez P13, and then Paolo Anzioso P14 ahead of Ryan Walker P15, AJ Campbell P16, Chris Wayne comes across the line P17 ahead of Enzo Canta, and I believe those are all the results who've crossed the line, ladies and gentlemen, but we did miss a couple of them, but thankfully we have a 5-minute break, and with that break we can give you the full set of results subject to any stewards' inquiries, and in fact, here they are. So after 20 minutes of racing on our first race of today, the round 7 sprint here at Road Atlanta, Rasmus Vuori taking the win, the Finnish driver in the end by less than a tenth across the line, ahead of Nathan Wade, who just crept ahead of Daniel Tufts to bring on home P2. Daniel Tufts P3 there, and an absolutely stellar effort for the privateer in the 34 car, and then Cristian Pérez missed out on the win and indeed the podium there in P4. I think there might be a little bit of an investigation after today's race with regards to the contact between Vuori and Pérez. I don't think there was any malice meant by that, but very close racing between the two of them. But you can understand the Astro Racing driver may feel a little bit inconvenienced by that. And then Ryan Jackson completed the top 5 there. He held off Rudy van der Meeden to the line in the battle for P5, with van der Meeden finishing P6 for STM, and then Terry McGrauther a further 7 seconds behind, leading the second major pack of drivers on throw at the head of the spear there to take that P7 position. Remco Pleister at P8 for RT Racing ahead of Neil Gardner, with Nick Vaughan Roberts creeping into P10, and with that securing himself reverse grid pole for the feature race. Sebastian Holmichael, best the rest in P11, and a great start to his racing today on his debut ahead of JT Capinen P12. A difficult end to his race for Capinen, but the same could be said for Juan Rodriguez of Firebird Sim Racing, who found himself off track in the run through turns 2, 3 and 4 in a freeway instant, and therefore had to pick up the pieces, but still he's got another race to go. Paolo Anzioso P40 for Artel Motorsport Blue ahead of Ryan Walker P15. Who made many gains in the race, given the fact he started from P25 on the grid, so 10 places gain. And then AJ Campbell, who kept him honest to the finish line, 2 tenths between them, but the Artel Motorsport driver could not find his way through come the checker flag. Chris Wayne, P17 for Gone Skipping Racing ahead of Enzo Canta, P18 the privateer, and we do believe that the visit to the pits was for a drive-through penalty. And as we come on further through the results, Nigel Easy, P19 ahead of Titus de Jong, and our top 20 there all finishing on the lead lap, and the RT Racing driver being at the bottom of that top 20 group. Outside the top 20, P21, Geoff Randall, who finished a lap down for Gone Skipping Racing, ahead of Gordon van den Bergen for Sickhead Racing. And then we did have the retirements of Tim Bertie for Sim RC, Mark Beckhouse and Kevin Budgeon to complete the standings. And the Speed World Academy and the Skips Racing drivers in particular will feel as though they've got plenty to prove in race number 2 of 2 here today at Road Atlanta. But that's how they finished on that circuit in our sprint race. And well, we do have a bit of time still, ladies and gentlemen. And just to give you a reminder of our schedule for today, we've got one more race to come, and it will be in approximately what is 2 minutes time. We're a little bit behind schedule, but not by too much, so of course just a little bit of patience will be appreciated. But in shortly 2 minutes time, we'll be going racing for 40 minutes of racing action, and it of course will be the round 8 feature here at the Road Atlanta short course. But as we do look to our drivers getting themselves set at the moment and making their way on around here in this warm-up session, it does give us a brief breather from the racing action. It gives me a quick breather to take a quick sip of water. As we look to Enzo Canta making his way into turn number 1, I think Canta will feel as though that is going to need to be another opportunity to try and get some major points after what was looking to be a strong performance in the sprint race, but undermined by that visit to the pit. But Canta definitely a fast driver out there. They all know he's got a Goliath job to do, given the fact he'll be starting towards the back of the pack this time around. But other key talking points that we saw in our first race of the day, in particular at the front of the field, was just again how strong the slipstream was under race conditions, but also the propensity to go 3 wide into certain corners, particularly the run through turns 1 into 3. Well, our drivers found that by the time they got into the braking zone for turns 2 and 3, they really need to bring it down to 2 wide at most, but really 1 line. And then in the run down towards turns 7 and 8 here, well, we did see those absolutely fanatical moves from some of our drivers, including the RT Racing driver of that Renko Place, who went up the inside to make it a 2-for-1 special, indeed one of the overtakes of the season. Now, meanwhile, we look to the YouTube chat, and then glad to see you all enjoying yourselves so far. And we see it down at Schuring saying that STN, Team STN, refers to Sim Racing Team Netherlands. If you did not know, and indeed I didn't know, I will keep that in mind. Thank you for that, Dan. I do appreciate it. And indeed, any little tidbits or snippets of information that you guys and girls tuning can provide, well, I do appreciate them, and I'll definitely save them to the memory bank where I can. As we look to Nick Vaughan Roberts, the Welshman in the number 27 car, another driver who found his way through the field, and indeed will be starting right towards the front in the feature race reverse grid as he makes his way up towards turn at number 10. Of course, that partial reverse grid, and speaking of which, it's going to be formed in approximately 20 seconds time as we're about to conclude this warm-up session and transition to the grid for race number 2. As the transition gets underway, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the feature race grid. This is how our drivers line up then for round number 8 in the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy for 2023, sponsored by Musical Money. It's Nick Vaughan Roberts who takes pole position, joined on the front row by Neil Gardner. The two drivers battling hard to finish inside the top 10 and being rewarded for it in the sprint. Renko Placer starts P3 for RT Racing, joined on the second row by Terry McGrauther, with row number 3 going to the STN driver of Vuori van der Meeden, who is joined by the privateer of Ryan Jackson. On row 4, we have Astro Racing's Cristian Pérez, joined by Daniel Tufts in P8. And then on the 5th row to complete the top 10, it's Nathan Wade and Rasmus Vuori. We then have Sebastian Holmaker, who starts off our 6th row at P11, joined by JT Copinum. And behind him on the 7th row of the grid, it's Juan Rodriguez for Firebird Sim Racing, joined by Paula Anziosa for Artel Motorsport Blue. We then have the pair of Ryan Walker and AJ Campbell, two rivals in the sprint race. They'll go for their rivalry once again into turn number 1, starting from the 8th row of the grid, with row number 9 going to Gone Skipping Racing's Chris Wayne, joined by Enzo Canta. Row 10 to complete the top 20 consists of Nigel Easy and Titus de Jong for RT Racing, with P21 being occupied by Gone Skipping Racing's Geoff Randall, who is joined by Gordon van den Bergen for Sickhead Racing, the two of them coming together, of course, in race number 1. Tim Bertie starts P23 for Sim RC, joined by Speed World Academy's Mark Beckhouse on the 12th row of the grid. And on the final row of the grid, starting P25, it skips Racing's Kevin Budgeon, who starts last but not least, and we're looking to make as much progress as he can when we go to green flag conditions. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is the grid gradually being set, and that's the order we can expect to see. And now, of course, we do wait for our final couple of drivers to take their places on the grid before we do go racing. But Vaughan Roberts is going to have a huge challenge in his hands, which is to try and hold on in the run to turn 1, and indeed try to break away or take a small pack of drivers away with him. But Neil Gardner, I suspect, will have other ideas on that front row of the grid. We saw a lot of pace from Gardner. We saw him battle hard through every corner in that second pack of drivers in the battle for P7. And can Neil Gardner potentially make an early gain and break away? All that and more. And we do have a pit stop, of course, which could factor in, but the grid is set. We await the lights. 1 red light, 2 red lights, 3 red lights, 4 red lights, 5 red lights. And it's lights out and away we go for the second race of the day as Nick Vaughan Roberts gets a good start and Neil Gardner's not able to attack into turn number 1, at least not initially, but as they power their way up through the gearboxes, this will be now where Gardner's got to make a decision. Does he go hunting or does he play the patient hunter? And as they make the way through turn 1, you can see Ryan Jackson on the outside there, falling a little bit back versus Roddy van der Meijden and Terry McGrauther as van der Meijden goes inside to outside through turns 1 and 2 and gets it hooked up at the break and then to turn 3, but coming on down the hill and through into the Esses they go. Meanwhile, further back we see Rasmus Vuori yet to gain any place. The same for Nathan Wade. A large number of drivers all taking a calm start to this race and not looking to gain too much ground. Meanwhile, we have had a major incident further back, and I believe it is between Kieran Budgeon and Nigel Easy. They've had it coming together as we do look to what is then Nigel Easy bringing it back onto circuit, and we'll come back to that very shortly. But meanwhile, we look to Neil Gardner, who's looking up the inside already versus Nick Vaughan Roberts, and in fact he was on the outside there and Vaughan Roberts letting it go and slotting back in as Gardner has a little bit of a wobble there coming on through the chicane, but as they make the way across the timing line at 4 ways turn number 9 and down towards the start finish line, you see Gardner here and Vaughan Roberts going toe to toe as they come through turn number 10. They charge away onto lap number 2, and this is how the field stands after 1 lap. It's Vaughan Roberts who leads ahead of Gardner P2, followed by Plessia P3, van der Meijden P4, but then you can see Roddy van der Meijden under major pressure from Cristian Pérez in P5, who's then followed up by Terry McGrauther, Daniel Tufts, and there's Ryan Jackson, Rasmus Vuori and Sebastian Holmeier complete the top 10 with JT Capin in P11, but meanwhile off circuit, that is Nathan Wade who's gone very wide, and with Wade losing it out there, he'll try and come back to the circuit as soon as possible. But I think there we did have a 2 to 3 wide situation going through turn 1 and everybody falling foul of it. And as the drivers charge on through here, we can see in the long pack now, Remco Pleister goes a bit wide. That's not Remco Pleister going wide, it was Remco Pleister going wide. I correct myself again, and Cristian Pérez now moves up to P3, but Pleister falls off the circuit, and now Pérez looking to go on the offensive to chase after Gardner and Vaughan Roberts as they come down towards turns 7 and 8, but onto the brakes they go, and meanwhile McGrath having to defend it versus van der Meijden, as meanwhile Tufts goes all in on the brakes. It's a major lock-up for Daniel Tufts, also for Rasmus Vuori locking up there, who just shoots out of camera, and as they make the way out turn 7 and 8, over the crest and down towards 9-10 they go. Tufts versus Jackson, the two of them started to get acquainted with one another physically as they make their way through turn 10, and Jackson there definitely right now trying to get the elbows out and say to Daniel Tufts, look, I'm not just going to give up the places willy-nilly as they make their way into turn number 1. Rolling their way on through here, Tufts stays to the outside, a little bit of drift there, the rear left tyre just seizes, but he catches it and Jackson backs off there, and Tufts making a brave move around the outside. Meanwhile, Sebastian Holmeier, who's gained multiple places, gained 3 off the line, and as they make the way through turn 4 and down into the S's, with Sebastian Holmeier right now definitely started to make headway and making some critical gains early on in this race. But speaking of drivers who've lost out by comparison, this is what happened to Kieran Budgeon and Nigel Easy on the opening lap at the race start. Making the way up the hill, and you'll see Budgeon on the inside here versus Easy on the outside into the braking zone. 2 wide they went, both drivers coming together, and well there I think both of them trying to state their claim to the apex and having a bit of a difficult one as a result. We also had an incident for Enzo Canta on the opening lap, and this is what happened to the Italian in the 77 car coming down towards the turn 7-8 chicane. Onto the brakes he went, and as he did, well in the end being contacted and making further contact there of a car that flipped on over, and well that was AJ Campbell who got connected with Enzo Canta, and well for AJ Campbell that is an absolutely shocking moment for him, and I hope he's okay, and thankfully he has been able to tow to the pits, but I think he will be a little bit shaken up by that one. But as we return to the pictures there, Canta coming in hot and AJ Campbell paying the price, as meanwhile we return to live pictures, and that is Ryan Jackson conducting a little bit of rallycross there through turn 1 into 2, 3, and I think there's a bit more to that story than meets the eye. Jackson there I think just finding himself going a little bit steered wide as they make the way into the Esses and up towards turn number 5. But you're looking at the live pictures for a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen, but before we settle on down we do also need to take a look at a replay involving Nathan Wade on lap 2 at turn 1. and it was getting very busy into turn 1. Wade in the number 5 car just goes a little bit deep. They're carrying all the speed, and in the end bounces his way along the grass and manages to catch it as he returns to the tarmac, but not without losing a sizable amount of race time. But now as we stay with your live pictures for a bit longer, rather than jumping back and forth here, we do look to Ryan Jackson, and indeed just in front Chris Wayne versus Nathan Wade, and Wade continuing that recovery drive now as he makes his way up the inside of Wayne for P11. Wayne on the outside here, and Jackson looking to make it 3 wide as they head into turn 1 in this battle for P11 as they come on through the right-hander, and Wade there stays close. Meanwhile, Jackson going all the way round. We've got a bit of dust being kicked up there, and that's 2 cars off and 1 rejoins. That's Capine, and in contact Beckhouse, it all goes wrong for the 90 of Winston Titus de Jong, and de Jong being collected. Vuori's been involved in an instant, and meanwhile Beckhouse there is off, and Titus de Jong as well is off, and Sebastian Holmichael also caught up in that, and JT Kapinen is also off and had to be taken to the pits. Well, 3 drivers there, and Beckhouse has had to retire immediately due to the damage. Goodness me, we come back to the pictures for a brief moment, and it all unfolds in very aggressive succession. But what exactly happened there, we'll find out shortly as we do get a replay queued up. But meanwhile, we continue to look at the live action here and looking back to the top 4, and we can see how quickly Cristian Pérez has moved up into this hunt for the top 2 positions. He's tucked in behind Neil Garner, and Nick Vaughan Roberts leading the race as they make the way onto what is for them lap number 6 under racing conditions in this feature. But charging on through, they've got plenty more time to go. They've only just cleared the opening 5 minutes, and we've already seen plenty of drama. We've still got 35 minutes of racing action to go here at Road Atlanta in the United States of America. As they come up the hill and in towards turns 2 and 3. Well, now for these drivers, I think they have to start to think about, do they have enough pace to just simply settle them down, or is there a little bit more pace out there? Particularly thinking of Cristian Pérez here, who has proven to be one of the fastest drivers under race conditions at every venue we've been to, and the 89 driver here, as he makes his way through turns 5 and 6, I think he'll feel as though he can gain 2 more places before he starts to settle on down. But Vaughan Roberts and Gardner may have other ideas here, rather than letting the Spaniard just simply squeeze his way up the order. As they head down towards turn 7, you can see McGrath for behind, also staying in contention and keeping Perez honest, as meanwhile we do also have Vandermeiden and Tufts not too far, only 1.5 seconds off, and it's further back as we look to Remco Pleister, who is defending here versus Geoff Randall. A little bit of a tap there between the rear of Pleister's car and the front of Randall's car, but they both survive it just about. But Randall making the move on Jackson, the run down the hill into turn 7 and 8, and now on the inside here versus Pleister through turn 10. Randall continues to make ground. Remco Pleister letting it go as they come across the timing line, and into turn 1 they go this time. Randall feels like he's got it done, but Ryan Jackson now coming in as he looks up the inside of the pair of Pleister and Randall. He gets one, he doesn't get the other, however, and Jackson now settles down as they make the way into turns 2 and 3, and Remco Pleister backs off there as they head into the braking zone. Now coming on down through turn 4 and into the Esses. But whilst things settle down for a brief moment, we do have an opportunity to take a look back at what exactly happened on what was lap number 5 to a number of drivers, including Rasmus S and Sebastian Holmichael. So this was in the run through turn 1 into 2. Now we're going to see contact there between Kapinen and Holmichael. Vuori takes evasive action, and then as that all unfolded, what we see there, that was JT Kapinen in contact with Mark Beckhouse, and then Titus de Jong trying to take evasive action but going the wrong way. But we now take another look back at that from the perspective of what was Titus de Jong, and well, of course, he came into this very late, a long way back, and you'll see things start to unfold in front. He will have seen this, he makes about the hill, and has to make a snap decision. He decides to switch to the left-hand side, but Beckhouse there and Kapinen collected together, and de Jong just taken to the wall. But as we then take another look back from the perspective of what is, by comparison, Mark Beckhouse, he made his way up the hill. And the Speedworld Academy driver in this side-by-side fight, and you see Kapinen there. Well, Beckhouse had no idea where Kapinen was going to be. He was obscured by the cars in front, and that is why it ended up in such a disaster for the trio. And the Speedworld Academy driver, they're just falling foul of circumstances as we now return to your live pictures, ladies and gentlemen. And what we can tell you that Beckhouse has had to retire, and also Kevin Budgens had to retire due to that incident on lap 1. Ryan Walker with technical issues with the car. They were able to get it run in the sprint, but not in the feature race, which is unfortunate. And JT Kapinen currently in the pit lane being serviced, but otherwise Titus de Jong has been able to get the car back out there. But meanwhile, as we look here to Ryan Jackson looking up the inside of Randall for P9, well, Randall there on the outside not holding on to the position, or does he, as he comes out of the corner there, and Jackson goes a little bit deep, and Randall simply says, right, I'll take that back, thank you very much. And as they head down into turn number 10, it's going to be 3 wide for a brief man. You don't go 3 wide through turn number 10, and that's why, because somebody's going to go wide in, and Ryan Jackson does, but they all survive it just about, and Ryan Jackson Jackson there tempting fate with Remco Pleiss and Gordon van den Bergen being absolutely bold as brass and making a 2-1 special. Meanwhile, Pleiss versus Jackson still ongoing. Will van den Bergen showing no signs of hesitancy, and here Pleiss really right now doing everything in his power for RT Racing to hold on to P11. And I think Jackson at this point may be absolutely fuming. For the simple reason he wants to gain ground, but Remco Pleiss seems to prove otherwise as they make their way into turn 5. As they come through the long right-hander, turns 5 and 6, and down towards 7 and 8, they charge once more. Chris Wayne only a second off of this battle and looking to get into the fight as soon as he possibly can, but coming on down. Meanwhile, we look here to Enzo Canta up the inside of Tim Bertie through turn number 6, and Bertie there's not got the momentum in the run out the long right to try and mount a change or a counter-attack, if you will, back into 7 and 8, and I think Canta here just simply trying to push forward and gain more time and places with it, but he's got a long way to go. His next target being 2 seconds up the road in the form of Rasmus Vuori, and of course the Finn will be looking to try and hold on to his position and make a recovery driver as soon as humanly possible. But as they come through turn number 10, meanwhile we look from them back up to your leader of Nick Vaughan Roberts, and here is the privateer in the 27 car leading this way by half a second over Neil Garner, with Cristian Pérez not too far off at the back of Garner, 2 tenths between them. But Vaughan Roberts starting to open some daylight between himself and his peers as he heads into turns 5 and 6, and this is where now it's all going to come down to the strategy starting to take an effect. As we move into what is the second quarter of this race, you can see now we're into the second 10 minutes, so starting to head into minute 11 through to minute 20. Well, all the places have started to settle down to a degree. It comes down to strategy, although I say that 2 drivers are not settling down at the moment. Rody van der Meijden making a return move up the inside there versus Daniel Tufts of P5 as they clear the chicane. But the critical point here is that with regards to the drivers, in the fact that now when they run together, do they save fuel or do they continue to battle one another? Because we have seen over previous rounds that fuel saving in the feature race from the very outset all the way through to the pit stop, it can gain you at least 3 to 4 seconds in the pit lane in terms of stationary time, and that's where our drivers now really have to have that reality check in terms of have they made enough ground or do they need to push on a little bit further, and is it wise to keep pushing on? And that's why Rody van der Meijden there back it off versus Tufts, recognising that now he doesn't need to fight for this place as much, especially with Rodriguez only 1.7 seconds behind and closing gradually. They need to try and work together here to save some fuel respectively, but also to stay clear of Rodriguez, who is getting closer and closer by quarter to corner, and also Nathan Wade here, and Wade with Rodriguez as they make the way through, and the privateer here pressing on in the number 5 car, but he's got Rodriguez for company as they make their way down towards turn 7 8. Rodriguez going to look up the inside. Does he find a way to do so? I don't think so. I think he backs off, and of course Nathan Wade taking a very different approach which we've seen in the last few rounds, which is he's normally been a little bit more aggressive on the fuel usage and tried to stay up front and gain place and gain time, but he may also be thinking about what can he do here in order to save some fuel and leapfrog his way back into the top 4 battle come at the second stint of this race. But as we look to the YouTube chat there, we see Ryan Walker confirmed no technical issues, had to skip the feature today as I have to be up for work at 5 AM tomorrow. That's very unfortunate, Ryan, they have to be up so early, but completely understandable. And now it's been a pleasure to see you out of the circuit today in your debut in the Skip Barber Change Trophy Series of 2023, and we hope to see plenty more of you over the course of the remainder of the season. But we wish you well this weekend, and indeed as a Wade that makes his way on down the hill, coming into turn with the Esses and into turn 5 and 6, we see him right now holding on to a P7 versus Rodriguez, but for how long will it be before they even make their way into this battle between Tufts and van der Meijden for P5? Alternatively, they start to fight one another. Well, Tufts here on the outside, letting van der Meijden take the authority into the braking zone here for the left-right chicane to turn 7 and 8, and they continue to exchange places. They continue to save fuel together, and this may just work out in the long haul, but as they make their way up the hill into turns 9 and 10. Meanwhile, we look to Nick Vaughan Roberts, the race leader now 7 tenths clear almost of Neil Gardner, continue to push on, and as he makes his way into the right hand return number 1, you can see right now Perez here staying close. In fact, we jump on board with Cristian Pérez and we just listen in to see if we can hear some fuel saving. Indeed, there a bit of fuel saving going into the braking zone for 2-3. In fact, lifted off the throttle about 50 metres from his braking point, and Perez right now, I think he feels confident that if he fuel saves, he can leapfrog Vaughan Roberts in the pits or stay close to him, given that Vaughan Roberts right now cannot fuel save in terms of using slipstream of another driver. He has the fuel save by lift and coast alone and not gaining any race time, and Vaughan Roberts pushing on. Gardner also having the distance of Vaughan Roberts, able to do some fuel saving, but you can see it again here, just as he makes his way into the braking point for turn 7 and 8. Pérez lifting off initially just a little bit, and that's how the gap between the two cars opened up slightly, and he brings it back together in the run through the corners. And Pérez, of course, does have the ace up his sleeve here in the fact that I think he has a bit more inherent pace behind him compared to his two rivals in front. McGrowther, of course, will be the wild card behind. McGrowther on similar pace to Gardner and Vaughan Roberts on paper, but you never know what he may be able to achieve in this run of the quartet of cars as they head up the hill and in towards turns 2 and 3. Pérez is definitely setting himself up for success right now. Meanwhile, further back, we see Brian Jackson up the inside here, Gordon van den Bergen, as they head out of turn 1. Van den Bergen having a little bit of a moment there, a bit of slap overs there creeping in, but he brings it to the inside. Jackson backs off there as they just about clear one another, coming into turns 2 and 3, down into 4. And meanwhile, Remco Pleister holding on to his position. Where Matisse de Jong is into the pit lane in P19, I think deciding to now put some fuel in the car. And of course the undercut is quite possible here. We have sometimes seen drivers go for pit stops as early as the 15th minute of the race, but normally we do see those pit stops materialise around the 17 to 18 minute mark, carrying all the way through to around the 30th minute. But as this race presses on, we can see Van den Bergen now trying to make a bit more ground versus Glacier, and around the outside he goes, holding to P10, and now his next target will be what is Geoff Randall up in P9, 1.5 seconds further up the road as they make their way down towards turn number 10 once again. But charging away over, we also look back to Chris Wayne as he heads on down the hill in towards turn 10 and battling side by side here with Enzo Canta, and Canta around the outside. I think the gone skipping racing driver Wayne here will be where, as we see Canta takes 2 wheels to the gravel very slightly, all to the grass on the exit of the corner, but he makes it count, or does he, as they head into turn 1, and Wayne has not got enough momentum. Rasmus Vuori is into the pit lane from what was P14 at the time, so he's decided to call it early as Rasmus Vuori. The Finns going all in on the undercut. Meanwhile, everybody else staying out there right now and staying on their strategy in terms of going a bit longer, and who is going to be the first to flinch in terms of our top 10? That is the big question here as we look to Nick Vaughan Roberts. And I think Roberts here has to be aware of the fact that he is battling against an uphill gradient in terms of the fuel saving strategy. He's not able to save as much fuel. In fact, he's fallen back towards Neil Gardner over the last couple of laps. The gap's come back to 3/10, and I wouldn't be surprised if Vaughan Roberts does decide to lift off into, say, turn 1, or turns he down into the chicane in the next couple of laps and lets Gardner take the lead of this race. Because right now, if things play out as they continue to do so, then Vaughan Roberts will really lose out when he comes into the pits. But he's going to lose out a little bit down the slide over turn 1. He catches it just in time. My goodness, that could not have been closer to disaster, but he found the very threshold there in terms of how much he can push the car through turn 1. And well, the Welshman here is absolutely delivering a drive to be desired as he makes his way down through the Esses and into turn 5. Meanwhile, McGrowther on the back of this group, and as we ride on board with the Scotsman in the Triple Eight, going through the right-hander there, turns 5 and 6, he'll be thinking right now, what can he do to also make himself gain an advantage in the pit stop? As he comes down towards turn 7 and 8 this time, we listen in. No major lift out. I think McGrowther may be having to push a little bit harder to stay close behind Pérez and Gardner here, and therefore McGrowther, he may find himself at a little bit of the mercy of the strategy gods in terms of what he can achieve after the pit stop. And never say never, he maybe needs some fuel saving indirectly. Alternatively, he may have other places where he's lifted the coast. But you can definitely see how that gap to Pérez just starts to inch open until the toe comes in. So for McGrowther, he's got to be wary of not losing the chase here as they make their way up the hill through turn number 1. We continue to make our way towards the halfway point of this race. It's a really solid run out, one up towards 2. But Pérez, of course, backing the car off there as he drops off the curb, and all 4 drivers, they're really sliding their way on through turns 2, 3 and into 4, and having to be careful here. I think we're starting to see the effects of tyre degradation building up, and the tyres do last a long time. They normally last to around the 30th minute, and that's when they start to fall off the proverbial cliff, and that's when the grip levels are not as high, as we see McGrowther falling back once again in the run down towards turn 7 and 8. But meanwhile, looking to Nathan Wade. Wade having recently made his way past Daniel Tubbs and continuing to crusade his way up the order into P5. His next target will be McGrowther, who's 5.4 seconds up the road, and in between is the intermediate step of the driver who's now effectively a lap down on the leaders of the field, and that's Paolo Antioso in P17, who we see then making his way through turn number 9 into 10. Antioso will stay on the inside here on the exit at turn 10, respecting that Wade will be seeing the blue flags waving. And meanwhile, that's a driver off circuit there, and I believe that is Titus de Jong, who's had another moment. He's had it go wrong out of turn number 10. We'll try and understand what exactly happened there very shortly. But meanwhile, Wade clears Antioso, and so it does Daniel Tufts and Juan Rodriguez as they head up the hill. And meanwhile, we also see a little bit further behind there what is Geoff Randall is trying to close on up, albeit the Gonskipping Racing driver still having to push on hard here, and he's got a way to go. And coming down the hill, we take a brief moment to take a look back at what happens to Titus de Jong at turn number 10. Was he made his way out of 9, just went a little bit wide there on the exit 9. I think miscalculated where the apex was, bounced off of the entry curb into turn 10 and had to collect the car on the escape road and then park it to let drivers come on through, but not the way he's wanted it to go. This race seemed to go from good to bad to disastrous for Titus de Jong, but still plenty more rounds in the calendar as we hear that Sebastian Holmichael's into the pit lane. And meanwhile, Neil Gardner makes his way into the pits as well. Gardner's the first driver to pull the trigger inside the top 4, and now will this work out for him, or will he find himself falling further down the order when it's all said and done? Will Vaughan Roberts, Pérez and McGrath carry on, but it is the Australian Neil Gardner who carries on as he makes his way down towards his pit box. But charging on through, we look back up to Nick Vaughan Roberts here and charge his way into the S's once again. We can see him comfortably making his way almost towards the end of this lap. As meanwhile, we've got a driver off there into the one. That is Tim Bertie, who's got it very, very wrong, making his way through the S's in the car, pointed the wrong way. And the Sim RC driver there having a difficult feature race, that was certain about. But meanwhile, as we look back to your race leader, well, right now, Vaughan Roberts definitely breaking clear of Pérez. He's got a 1 second gap, but how much fuel has Vaughan Roberts used in order to hold on to this lead and hold that gap open? That is the question here, and I suspect he's going to be spending at least 2 or 3 seconds longer in the pit lane compared to Pérez in terms of that stationary time when they eventually do come on in. We transition into the second stage of this race now in terms of that second half, and as they head on through towards the end of what is their 19th lap under race conditions, on to lap number 20 now. Still plenty more to be added to the tally, where it's Vaughan Roberts who leads ahead of Pérez and McGrath, with Rodriguez moving up to P4. As into the pit lane comes Daniel Tufts from P4, and Geoff Randall is also in now. Tufts will be an interesting one in the fact that number 34 driver was showing a lot of pace in the hunt for P4 through the P5 and going early compared to his peers. This could give him an opportunity to make the jump. Meanwhile, speaking of trying to jump on an undercut, here is Neil Gardner as he makes his way out to 7, 8 and up towards 9 and down towards 10 he goes. Well, he comes on through the right-hander here, and in terms of his stationary time, it was 17 seconds practically, albeit minus a couple hundredths of a second. He crosses the line, and Tufts still in his pit box. Meanwhile, Geoff Randall already leaving his pit box by comparison, and Tufts started to leave. Meanwhile, whilst all this is going on, we'll give an update on their times very shortly. Vaughan Roberts has been caught by Pérez. Well, I think Vaughan Roberts now wary of the fact that with the pit stop beckoning, he needs to try and save some fuel to shorten that run in the pit lane. But he goes a bit wide. They're coming out of turn 8. He's into the pit lane. Vaughan Roberts decides enough's enough. He's going to release Cristian Pérez, and as Pérez goes on through to take the lead of this race for the first time today, now the Astro Racing driver will absolutely hammer it for at least a lap in order to get himself set up. He'll know his in-lap will be coming up soon, and he'll want to make the jump on everyone as he comes up the hill. Meanwhile, whilst he heads on towards turns 2, 3 and 4 with Terry McGrath in tow, where's Neil Gardner in all this? Well, gonna making his way through at turns 7 and 8 here. He's moved up to P9 ahead of Wade at Tufts and Randall, and Nathan Wade, of course, with his pit stop complete, has returned to P10. Jackson in the pit lane now. Vaughan Roberts still being serviced in the pits, and to put it in perspective, Randall's pit stop time is a 17.4. Meanwhile, Tufts at 17.3. Gardner's had the shortest stop so far. Jackson still being serviced. Meanwhile, Vaughan Roberts has made his way out of the pit lane, and Vaughan Roberts has taken a 12.1 second pit stop. I would say that is a huge underfalling for Vaughan Roberts, because he's been leading this race, and right now the fact he's ahead of what is Neil Gardner by 5 seconds, well, Vaughan Roberts surely has not added enough fuel to get to the end of the race unscathed on his own fuel capacity. He's going to have to do a little bit of fuel saving in order to get it done, and he'll need to tuck in behind the driver. But with Gardner 5.4 seconds back, Vaughan Roberts has definitely played an oddball strategy here, because it is such a short stop compared to his peers, and the only other driver who comes close is Enzo Canta, a 15.5 second pit stop, albeit Canta right now down in P13 and not really factoring into this battle for the lead, which we believe that Vaughan Roberts will be back into, given the fact he's had such a short stop by comparison with his peers. As he comes down the hill through 9 and 10, the only other thing I can imagine is Vaughan Roberts right now is capitalising on the fact he will fall back into the clutches of Pérez McGrath and also Gardner come the end of the race, and therefore he could potentially go overly defensive and really slow the pace of the race down. But here we've seen so far just how easy it is to really make 2-3 wide battles into certain corners. I think Vaughan Roberts may have made a missed opportune call here, as meanwhile we look to your race leader of Pérez. He's got McGrath still within 3 tenths behind, and to be fair to the Scotsman, he's not let Pérez go whatsoever. But as the Spaniard and the Scotsman make the way over the ridge and down into turn number 10, no change again as we ride on board the gearbox of Pérez, heading on to another lap. Now heading up towards turn number 1 this time. Well, it will be for the pair of them, be putting in every lap they can. They want to keep it smart, calm and consistent, albeit they are coming up behind a little bit of traffic in front of them in the form of Sebastian Holmichael, who is running in currently with P14. And therefore they'll need to be wary of the fact that if they catch him at this opportune moment, they may just end up losing some lap time, and that lap time could be ever critical for the strategy. But as we do look back to the exterior camera here, you can see Pérez doing everything right in the run through the sweep of the Esses, coming on through turns 5 and 6 and down towards 7 and 8 goes this time. He picks up the toe of Holmichael just on the exit of turn 5, and in fact that will work out nicely for him. As you can see there, Holmichael backing off completely, and Pérez right now being given plenty of time and speed in order to carry a little bit more momentum into the chicane. McGrath is still there, keeping them honest as they come on through, and up towards the hill they go. Will one of them peel into the pit lane this time? I don't think so. No, they both stay out. Meanwhile, we look back to P4, and this is Gordon van den Bergen, who's yet to pit, who is being pursued by fellow first stinter of Remco Placer as they make the way onwards towards the next lap as well. Now coming over the ridge and down into turn number 10, they both carry on, and Run Rodriguez in between the two packs, the pairs of drivers in P3, also carries on. So we are not seeing our top 6 pit, with Chris Wayne also passing the pit entry and deciding to stay out. So the top 6 have yet to pit. Everybody else has pitted at least once in terms of taking a pit stop, but we believe everybody else has also completed their essentially scheduled pit stop, or that mandatory pit stop they had planned on the cards. But as we do look to place here, trying to hunt down Van den Bergen, of course they're battling for P4 on circuit currently. But this battle further down inside the top 10, I believe just towards the very end in a battle for P9, P10. But of course them, it's absolutely critical as they make the way through. They put aside the battling for a brief moment and focus on running their strategies, working together for the greater good, so that way they can then fight one another come the very end for their final spots. But meanwhile, looking to drivers who've already pitted, we can see here Geoff Randall chasing after Daniel Tufts as he makes his way through turns 3 into 4, and Will Tufts here right now holding on to P10, but knowing that is the equivalent to P5 in his mind as they head down the hill and in towards turn number 5 very shortly. But through the right-hander they go, and as they do, Will Tufts having a bit of a slow run through the S into turn 5, and Randall here may just have the opportunity as Placer and Van den Bergen have swapped places in the run to the chicane on the previous lap. We cut away just as the move was about to be made, and they're both into the pit lane. Chris Wayne also in, and Randall here up the inside of Tufts. Tufts not fighting this because they both know that with Placer, Van den Bergen and Wayne due to come in any moment now, they'll want to jump them as soon as possible as they head out of the chicane. Through 9 and into 10, well, down the hill they go, and onwards towards the end of this lap. Vaughan Roberts returns to P4. We believe he will return to the de facto lead of this race, albeit with a very short pit stop, meaning he will have to save a lot of fuel. But Van den Bergen leaving his pit box, but Randall still ahead of Tufts here, and Randall and Tufts are both going to clear Van den Bergen, Placer and Wayne, as meanwhile we do look to Jackson and Canta coming on through, and now Canta ahead of Jackson as they head up the hill. We can see there, that's Van den Bergen and Placer just up the road. They've got Anzioso between them, who's a lap down, and Canta and Jackson, so that's the way it's worked out. But Canta and Jackson making a lot of ground. Meanwhile, into the pit lane for a P2 comes Terry McGrath. He brings it on in, and also Juan Rodriguez comes in. But meanwhile, Cristian Pérez stays out another lap. And the Astro Racing driver trying to bleed down the fuel tank of the car as much as he possibly can here. He wants as light a possible car, and who could blame him? He wants to push on and gain as much lap time as possible as he comes through the S's and into turn 5. As he makes his way through the long right-hander at turns 5 and 6. What about Vaughan Roberts then? Well, we do look to Vaughan Roberts, who crosses the timeline and will already making his way out of the pit lane is McGrath. And McGrath having an even shorter pit stop, 10.8 seconds. Well, surely they're not going to perform miracles on the fuel tank here. If they are, well, Terry McGrath has literally just said to Vaughan Roberts, I see your short pit stop and I raise you 1.5 seconds worth of pit time. And Terry McGrath returns to P2, but I wonder how long it will be before he starts to feel the pinch of the fuel tank. The same for Vaughan Roberts. Neil Gardner, meanwhile, P3 P4 here is the privateer from Australia. He's got Nathan Wade closing very rapidly. The gap between them coming down by 0.6 of a second a lap, and Gardner very wary of the fact that he's going to be under pressure soon, and Wade will be right there. And to put it in perspective, as they make the way on around, this will show you what is the lap time history between the two drivers, and here it is in terms of Gardner versus Wade, and you can see a lap to lap, minus a couple of exceptions. On average, it is 0.6 a lap that Wade is stripping out of Gardner. Such is the colossal pace that Wade is bringing to bear here to try and bring on home a top 5 result as a minimum. But as we do bring back the battle box there in the bottom right hand corner of your screen, Gardner now under pressure. And surely he's got to think about letting this go right now and trying to stay with Wade until the very end of the race and then go hunting once again. And Nathan Wade's pit stop very similar to Neil Gardner, so the two of them are fueled up to go to the finish line, as Juan Rodriguez has come out behind them by 1.2 seconds. So Rodriguez will also factor into this. Geoff Randall and Daniel Tufts are only a further 4 seconds off after that, so it could already start to bunch up in the final 5 minutes of racing here at Road Atlanta. But as they head on down into the Esses here, Gardner now with Wade so close behind as we run on board the gearbox. Cristian Pérez into the pit lane. Gardner here taking a very tight line into turn 5. Wade looking for the cutback run off of the right hand apex and head down towards turn 7 8. They go, nothing between them currently. Wade within 2 attempts now, he builds the pace, he gets closer and closer as Gardner puts it in the middle of the road, brings it off centre and back onto the racing line, and Wade up the inside here. It's 4P4 and he gets it done. Gardner doesn't fight it too hard, he put up a small defence there, but acknowledging there's a bigger prize at stake, and there's a potential podium finish. Meanwhile, we look to the front of the field and Terry McGrauther comes on through the timeline to complete his lap and takes the lead of this race, with Cristian Pérez leaving his pit box as they make the way on through. We do look to the blimp camera here and you can see Nick Vaughan Roberts coming on through, and then it's Cristian Pérez in P3, and Pérez there returns to the racing order, albeit he's a long way back, and there's the gap in perspective. That's McGrauther in the top right corner of your screen down to the top centre, and then you have Vaughan Roberts and Pérez, but of course with both McGrauther and Vaughan Roberts having very short pit stops compared to Pérez, whose pit stop was 12.3 seconds. But I think Pérez can get away with that given the amount of fuel saving he's been doing. I think Vaughan Roberts and McGrauther may not be able to go as long, and that is the worry right now, that Pérez can just simply snatch this race away from the pair of them by simply having more fuel to go to the end and not having to worry as much about fuel saving. But they have got a gap of what is almost 5 seconds over Nathan Wade, and Wade is closing very rapidly indeed. And indeed, to put that in perspective, here is Wade as he makes his way through the turn 7-8 chicane. He's got Gardner and Rodriguez in tow as they make the way down towards turn number 10. And right now it's the top 3 pack versus the trailing 3 pack, and who will be the winner and who will be on the podium? That's the question. There's 6 drivers who could potentially win this one. I think there's a couple of favourites in the form of Pérez and Wade, but you never know what can happen here. We still got another 8.5 minutes to go in this feature race, and further back Daniel Tufts still battling with Geoff Randall as Gordon van den Bergen has found his way past Remco Pleischer off camera. We'll get a replay of that very shortly, but Tufts here close to the back of Randall, trying to reach out as he's recently passed Tufts as Randall as they make the way into turns 2, 3 and 4. In fact, as they come down, we firstly get a replay of how Randall picked up P7 off of Daniel Tufts. We're heading on out of the final corner in towards turn number 1. Randall getting the better run and up the inside. Tufts not really having a response to this, and that's how he got the move done there. And then what about Gordon van den Bergen versus Remco Pleischer for P9? Well, this is how the move was made. It was in the run down towards the chicane to turn 7 and 8. Looking up the inside there onto the brakes, and well ahead before Pleischer could even get ready to break into the corner. They're making the move, Enzo Canta catching up a rapid rate not. We return to live pictures, and we have had a change of race leader. Nick Vaughan Roberts up the inside there. Oh, but Cristian Pérez, in fact, it's McGrauther who's lost out. McGrauther into fuel save. Pérez around the outside, and Vaughan Roberts backs off on the inside here. Cristian Pérez retakes the lead of the race. He gains 2 places in the run of one stretch, and as they make the way up towards turns 2, 3 and 4, this is the fuel saving factor coming in, because Pérez right now has all the cards in his hand, and with the fact there's a 3.5 second gap to Nathan Wade, well, Wade will have to find his way past McGrauther, and Vaughan Roberts will do everything they can not to make it easy, and Pérez can just simply start to gap this, given the fact we think he's got the fuel tank to run it comfortably to the end. Vaughan Roberts and McGrauther will need to stay with Pérez and fuel save off him to the very end in order to have a chance to finish on the podium. It's going to be very on the limit there for the Welshman and McGrauther as they make the way down towards turn number 7. The Scotsman there in the hunt, but I think right now they'll be thinking all about keeping it calm, keeping it collected, just sipping away at the fuel tank. Meanwhile, further behind, Enzo Canta looking for the move for P9 versus Bergen. It's down into the turn 7-8 chicane here, up the inside, much like what Bergen only did moments ago versus Placer. And meanwhile, Jackson doing the same up the inside of Placer, but Placer counter-attacks there on the run through turn number 8, defends the inside line. Jackson now trying to go all the way around the outside through 9 and 10. It's too wide as they head up towards the start-finish line, but Placer there on the inside. Jackson has to back off slightly. He'll now build up the momentum once more. He switches to the inside here as he looks at a run into turn 1. Placer there gives the door open, and Jackson too wide on entry. Will he be on the outside up towards turn number 2? Will he decide against it? Well, he's not got the run. There's a bit of contact between the two. Jackson was taken to the grass there. Still defends the inside. Placer gives him the space in return after the misinterpretation of the width for his car. But Jackson loses out in the end and drops back to P12 in this battle. As they come down through the Esses and up towards turn 5. Meanwhile, we look to Geoff Randall versus Daniel Tufts in the battle for P7. And really, this is the furthest the two of them can fight now, with Rodriguez almost 5 seconds clear and Randall under pressure as Tufts looks for the move. Onto the brakes they go. He can't quite find it at the moment, and Randall stays there versus Tufts for the time being as they head onwards towards the next lap very shortly. But meanwhile, as they make the way on through, we can confirm to you that Cristian Pérez has already got a 1 second gap over Vaughan Roberts, and McGrath has fallen to 2.3 seconds behind. I think Terry McGrath is completely underfueled, and now he is paying the price for it, because as you look here to McGrath, the Scotsman doing everything he can to wheel the car on with all the will in the world here. I don't think he can make that fuel tank go much longer as he makes his way down through turn 4, and now it's Wade, Garner and Rodriguez immediately behind. The trio are closing and absolutely rabid. They'll be all looking for that podium spot as they head into turns 5 and 6, and McGrath here will need to sip fuel off the back of them in terms of just fuel saving and running that slipstream. If he wants to get to the finish, he will not want another pit stop, because that will take him right out of the top 10 order. But Wade immediately on the outside there on the exit, and as they make the way down towards the chicane, he's got ahead as Nathan Wade. He's up to P3. His next target is Nick Vaughan Roberts, who's 2.6 seconds up the road and gradually closing, and now Neil Gardner and Juan Rodriguez will look to try and find their way past McGrath as well. We're coming on down through turn 9 into 10 here. Well, Gardner will look to pick its way through turns 1 and 2, but you can also see Rodriguez staying close and not quite closed up versus Gardner. But again, I think Rodriguez also just trying to give himself some fuel for the end of the race, given that Rodriguez's pit stop time was 2 seconds long, 2 seconds slow, we should say. In fact, 2 seconds shorter, using the right word to describe it, versus Gardner's time. And Gardner here, with all the fuel in the world, is making this count, albeit we look to Nick Vaughan Roberts, as meanwhile, we've lost Pérez. Pérez has dropped off circuit somewhere, and McGrath has fallen back. In fact, Cristian Pérez, I think, has had an off, and in a bit of drama, what exactly happened to Pérez, we'll find out very shortly. Meanwhile, Rodriguez on the inside here versus Willis McGrath as they come through turn number 5. Well, it's all kicked off between them through the S's, and the Firebird Sim Racing driver carries the momentum through the inside of 6 down towards 7 and 8 on the racing line. It'll be the outside in terms of this battle. McGrath has just not got enough steam in order to carry the counter-attack in, and as they head on through, Rodriguez moves up to P5. But we take a look back at what exactly happened to Cristian Pérez, who dropped out the lead of the race. As he made his way into turn number 1 on the apex, go quite aggressively. It sends the car a little bit wide, and the car just simply dips the tyre to the outside onto the grass there, and Pérez having to slide his way back together. But meanwhile, we look to what happened here for Juan Rodriguez, and as he made his way over the line and down towards turn 4 into the S's, we see McGrath there going slowly, letting Gardner go. Rodriguez then looks through here on inside to outside run, has to back off, and then goes all into turn 5. A little bit of contact between, I think, feeling as though why wasn't McGrath just simply letting him go as well. But McGrath not recognised. I think the Firebird Sim Racing driver was coming on through, but that's how it played out for them. But as we return to live pictures now, Rodriguez now what is a total of 7.5 tenths off the back of Gardner, and looking to try and catch up once more. Meanwhile, Cristian Pérez has retaken the lead off camera during the replay footage there, passing Nick Vaughan Roberts, and Vaughan Roberts just has not got enough fuel to be able to defend, so he's trying to hold on to the back of Pérez for a P2 finish. That'll be the best he thinks he can achieve. Unless Pérez makes another mistake, and he may be able to sneak it in. But as they make their way through turn number 10, well, they'll only have 2 more laps to go as they go onto the penultimate lap here, crossing the timing line. 2 minutes remaining, and into turn 1 they charge. Meanwhile, we look back to Rodriguez as he chases after Neil Gardner, and Gardner having to go defensive here into turn 1 already. What is there? A challenging move from Rodriguez as he heads up the hill, and meanwhile Gardner doing everything right right now in order to hold on to position as they come on through turn 4 very shortly. Rodriguez looking very fast, looking very fierce, and looking to pounce as they head down towards the chicane and coming onwards towards turn number 5. We jump on board and look back from the gearbox of the 74 car piloted by Neil Gardner. Going through turn number 5 here, and the door slightly open up for Rodriguez, who has a really strong run off of the Esses and carries it through 5 and 6. Looking around the outside to inside here as they head on down. We look to the exterior camera. It's going to be Rodriguez on the right of your picture, with Gardner on the left of your picture as the camera pans round. And Juan Rodriguez looks up the inside. He goes all in on the brakes, and it looks like clockwork there as he gets it down the braking. And Juan Rodriguez moves up to P4 with only one more lap to go. Meanwhile, as we look to the front of the field, he heads onto the final lap. White flag waves, and Cristian Pérez leads this race, and it can only go one way at this point. All he's got to do is keep the tyres on circuit, keep the car safe and on the asphalt, and he's got this done with a gap of 7/10 of a second. And Vaughan Roberts right now will just simply need to stay with Pérez. He's got Wade closing gradually, and as they make the way through at the S's very shortly, Nathan Wade now will know he's got to do everything to try and get the P2 here. He's got to push on and hope that Vaughan Roberts starts to splutter towards the end of this lap as they make the way through the S's into turn 5. I think Vaughan Roberts may have just found the right balancing act here as they head through 5-6, charging all the way round. The gap stays at 8/10 currently. Vaughan Roberts not succeeding in terms of giving way to Nathan Wade, but in return, as they make the way down towards the braking zone here, you can see the three tries separated by 8/10 apiece. Onto the brakes they go, and Cristian Pérez here absolutely nails it from corner to corner. It's only one more major corner to go. He heads through the rise of 9, downhill into turn number 10. The checker flag awaits him as he comes through the final corner. It will be a win in the feature for Cristian Pérez as he crosses the line. Your race winner for Astro Racing by 7.5 over Vaughan Roberts. Nick Vaughan Roberts holds on to P2, ahead of Nathan Wade P3. It'll then be Neil Gardner P4 ahead of Juan Rodriguez P5. Geoff Randall finished P6, holding off Daniel Tufts to the line, and it'll be Enzo Canta who recovers to P8 in the end, ahead of Gordon van den Bergen, with Ryan Jackson P10 holding off Remco Pleister to the finish line. Remco Pleister best the rest in P11. Terry McGrath with that loss of fuel, with that very short stop, will be coming on home P12. He was able to get the car home, but I think he'll be kicking himself for what could have been a podium finish if he had taken a bit more fuel. And then it will be Sebastian Hollmichael, who despite the early incident still finishes P13 ahead of Rodi van der Meijden, who will very shortly come through P14, holding on to the position ahead of what is their Pala Anzioso, who finishes a lap down P16. And then it will be Chris Wayne, who's already finished the race, who finishes P15 there, and he will finish a lap down compared to his peers. The same for AJ Campbell, P17, and Titus de Jong, the last of our finishers, P18 there, a lap off of the leaders come the checkered flag. But what a race between our drivers from start to finish, ladies and gentlemen. And whilst Cristian Pérez may have taken the win here and definitely furthered his campaign, Nick Vaughan Roberts as well has shown today that whilst he didn't have enough fuel to potentially go on the offensive for the win come the very end, he was able to balance the act of strategy versus fuel saving and hold on to a very well earned P2. But Nathan Wade once again makes it another feature race podium, and with that the number 5 driver continues to push his championship lead forward as he really has become the man to beat. But as our drivers make the way in to their pit stalls very shortly, indeed many have already, but just cooling on down right now, we take a look at those race results subject to any stewards' inquiries. So after 40 minutes of racing here in round 8 of the 2023 Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, brought to you today with the round 8 feature at Road Atlanta Raceway, and of course the short course playing host to our drivers, Cristian Pérez taking the win for Astro Racing by 7.5 over Nick Vaughan Roberts, with Nathan Wade battling his way up to P3. Neil Gardner P4 there, missing out on the podium, but still be very pleased with that P4 finish in what's been a strong pair of races for Gardner today. And then Juan Rodriguez P5 there for Firebird Sim Racing, I think ruining what could have been if he'd been given a couple more opportunities to push on through versus his peers. Geoff Randall P6 for Gone Skipping Racing, not quite on top 5 today, but still carrying on that momentum inside the top 10, and then just holding off Daniel Tufts P7 with Enzo Canta P8 ahead of Gordon van den Bergen for Sickhead Racing, and Ryan Jackson completing the top 10. Remco Pleister for RT Racing completing the run to the best of the rest in P11, with Terry McGrath for P12, again ruining what could have been if he'd just taken a bit more fuel in the pit stop. Indeed 2 more seconds stationary time, and he may have had enough fuel to pull off a Nick Vaughan Roberts in terms of not having the fuel to battle, but having the fuel to stay on the podium. But still we'll have to keep our eyes on the Scotsman as he goes deeper into the season. And then Sebastian Hollmichael P13 with Rodi van der Meijden completing at P14 in his finishing position there for Team STM. And the last of our drivers to finish on the lead lap. P15, Chris Wayne finishing a lap down for Gone Skipping Racing ahead of Paolo Anziosa for Arto Motorsport Blue. And then his sister teammate, Arto Motorsport's AJ Campbell P17 with Titus de Jong at P18 there for RT Racing. We continue on down the finishing order and we see it was 18 finishers out of 25 starters with 4 of our drivers finishing a lap down. And in terms of our retirees, we had Tim Bertie P19 for Sim RC ahead of Rasmus Vuori P20, Nigel Easy P21, JT Kopinen P22, Mark Beckhouse for Speed World Academy P23, Skips Races Kevin Budgeon P24 retiring on the opening lap and not able to make it to the grid due to work commitments this weekend. Ryan Walker there P25. But what brilliant racing up and down the field in both races today, and really this feature race has been the icing on the cake. But whilst the racing may have been completed, ladies and gentlemen, the show's not quite over yet because we've still got our post-round interviews to go and we'll be bringing those to you in approximately 10 to 12 minutes time. The big question is, we've seen all the race and we've enjoyed it, but what did our drivers have to think about it here at our Road Atlanta circuit that has certainly delivered? Well, we'll find out very shortly. Don't go anywhere, you won't want to miss the post-round interviews. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is time for us to get our post-round interviews underway. Now today we have 3 interviews who have volunteered their time. We're firstly going to be hearing from reigning championship leader, and that is Nathan Wade, the privateer in the number 5 car, who had quite the mixture of results at the very top end of the field. Before then we'll be hearing from Nick Vaughan Roberts, the privateer, who whilst he didn't have the strongest of qualifying sessions but crept inside the top 10, he managed to stay inside the top 10 and benefit from that result in the sprint race to be able to jump to the front in the feature race and never look back. And then we'll be hearing from the rising star, your qualifying pole sitter, 4th place finish in the sprint race and winning the feature race of Astro Race's Cristian Pérez in the 89. Indeed, 3 different perspectives we suspect today, but as we get underway, we hear firstly from Nathan Wade, who joins me now. Good evening to you, Nathan. Can you hear me? I believe, ladies and gentlemen, Nathan Wade may be just a little bit busy at this brief moment, but he should be able to join us in a moment or two. And as I think he joins me now, Nathan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, it's great to have you with us, Nathan. And well, firstly, congratulations today on what has been a double podium for yourself at Road Atlanta and really carrying that championship momentum forward. How do you feel the American circuit has treated you today?
Yeah, hi, Paul. It's been a tough couple of races. It is a very enduring track to drive. That's specifically the short layout. Because you just don't really have any straights, just to kind of chillax for just 5 seconds. So it's quite intense the whole way. But that second race was something else. The first race was pretty easy going, but the second one was very intense.
Oh, indeed, and the intensity really seemed to build as that feature race went on. But just before we come on to the races, just to talk a little bit about qualifying, of course, we've seen you be really one of the masters of using the slipstream and also nailing all your apexes on a lap to put together a masterclass of a lap. But today, P3 in qualifying, 1.5 tenths off of the pole lap set by Cristian Pérez. Do you feel as though it was a little bit more out there in terms of what you could achieve, or was that lap the best you could get out of the car?
No, there's definitely more in it. It doesn't help that it's such a short track that there's small gains in every corner. But most people are pretty much on par with one another at this track, and you just need to get a good slipstream. And I didn't get the best slipstream. I should have started, like a second behind Geoff going into my laps, but I was about 0.8 on most of them. So there's a couple tenths there, but it is what it is.
Well, a couple of attempts missed saw you start on the second row of the grid for the sprint race, and from the outset it did look as though it got very nip and tuck between yourself, Vuori, Pérez, and also Rudy van der Meijden, who qualified just behind you. Just take us through that 20-minute race in terms of that battling back and forth, because it seemed as though at certain points you were in the pack and falling behind it, then you jumped forward, and then it all unfolded towards the very end with Pérez being knocked aside.
I was just trying to kind of eye up a move for the last lap. I was trying to work out where I wanted to be going on to the last lap. Obviously, that all got ruined towards the end, but I spent most of the race kind of slowly trading with Cristian, but we probably should have fought more. It would have been more enjoyable, but I just didn't really have the confidence yet, especially into the chicane, because I hadn't done much practice. So I was still trying to learn my braking point for that corner. But it was a pretty chill race, apart from those last 2 laps, which spiced everything up a little bit. But I was quite happy to come away with P2. Just kind of wish it had been a win.
Oh, indeed. Not quite the win you were looking for, but still the P2 set yourself up for a P9 start on the grid for the feature race. And of course, we've seen that there's been a few gambles from yourself in feature races in the past. We look back to Sebring, where the strategy didn't quite play off as much, but today it seems like you really had to fight your way up the places to finish on the podium.
Yeah, there's 2 big mistakes from myself. The first one, turn 1, lap 2. I think Rasmus went up the inside of me. I couldn't do anything. I wasn't expecting him to send it, and because of it, I had to drive out wide, which set me back a little bit. And then by lap 4, I think I caught back up to him. And going into the chicane, I had there was a big backup of the cars, and as I went to hit the apex at full speed, I suddenly had Rasmus in front of me, and I tried to avoid him. I accidentally tapped him, so apologies to him for that. But then that caused me to lose the rear. I then cut the second corner in the chicane, got to slow down, and then ended up, I think, P14. And from there, it was just quali laps the entire race. Managed to nail my pit. I still had 3 litres, so I probably could have left the pits probably second and a half, 2 seconds quicker, but I'd much rather play it safe and stick with a P3. But if I'd have put in the correct amount of fuel, I think I could have come with a win there.
Well, it was fine margins, but you played it safe on fuel, and meanwhile some others perhaps did not play it safe, and particularly what was in the Terry McGrath, who came out the pits after only a 10-second stop. You very correctly caught up to him, and I have to ask, were you starting to see for both McGrath and also Vaughan Roberts, who just finished ahead of you, that they didn't have the fuel to get to the end?
Yeah, they were. They did. A couple of them were talking in the chat as well and saying about it. And Terry was pretty confident that he didn't have enough fuel. So I think he just dropped off quite quickly, trying to fuel save, which was probably the smart thing for him to do. And then Nick, I was kind of hoping that it was running out of fuel. But he as soon as Perez came back out, he sat behind him and just wanted to kind of draft his way to the rest of the race. But Nick did start. The engine started chugging at just over the crest, going onto the last corner on the last lap. So I did almost get him at the line. But sad, if he hadn't got over that crest, I think I'd have got him. But unfortunately, he did. But I'll take P3, double podium. It's good points.
Oh, most definitely. And whilst it didn't work out perfectly in the feature, you still made the most of it and got yourself to the podium. And with that double podium, that does cement you as our championship leader as this series carries on. Of course, I have to ask you the question. At this point, you are the leading favourite. How does that make you feel, that title? Is this where you want to be right now, or would you rather that favourite accolade goes to somebody else?
I don't know. I know I'm going to miss. There's going to be a couple Fridays I'm gonna have to miss. I think there's 2, so I'm not sure if there's drop weeks in this series yet or not, but if I'm kind of hoping there are, so I just have to make sure that I maximize every single race that I do. But yeah, championship doesn't mean anything at the minute, or like the lead, sorry. I only care about it on the last race, to be fair.
Oh, that's an understandable approach and quite a sensible one. And of course, as we charge forward now, rounds 9 and 10 at Bergen in a week's time, it's the West Virginia circuit of Summit Point. How are you feeling for another American circuit?
I like the track. I'm pretty confident there, so I think it should be a nice, good fun battle again with the usual leading pack. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we look forward to seeing how you get on there in a week's time. But just before we let you go, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
You as always. Paul always does a great job with the broadcast, so shout out to you, Paul. Geoff and everyone else who runs the league, because it's a great league and it's nice to be back in the skippies, and then just everyone else on the track today. It was all good, clean racing. So I'm glad for it.
Well, we're all the more glad to have you out of the circuit battling week in, week out. But with that, Nathan, congratulations on your double podium today, and may the progress continue when you head to Summit Point in a week's time.
Thanks for that, Paul.
Have a great Easter. So hearing there from Nathan Wade, our privateer, who in the end couldn't quite bring home the wins he necessarily wanted, but was able to bring on home a double podium to back up a P3 in qualifying, and it was fine margins in both races. In the sprint, it was all about the back and forth battle between him and Cristian Pérez that was interrupted by the presence of Rasmus Vuori towards the end, which saw all hell break loose and have to come back under control, but still it was a P2 finish. And then in the feature race, as we've seen in the replay pictures in the background during the interview, it was an early group of instants which saw Nathan Wade drop all the way down the order, but he brought himself back together. He regrouped and then went back on the offensive later on in the race to bring on home a P3. Could he have taken a little bit less fuel to get a P2? Quite possibly, perhaps even the win, but still playing it safe rather than sorry, has seen him retain a huge haul of points, and that's going to do him well as the championship season goes on. As we now look to our second interviewee, where we head from Nathan Wade to Nick Vaughan Roberts, the number 27 driver, who today I think has surprised many with a great pair of performances, but particularly in the feature race, where he was able to bring it on together with strategy and also using the partial reverse grid to his advantage as he gets ready to join us in the interview room. His perspective on the race is going to be a little bit different perhaps in terms of he really was holding on to the fuel come the very end. But as he does, join me now in the interview room. Nick, are you there? Can you hear me?
I am. Hello. Hi, Paul. How are you?
All good, thank you, Nick. But to yourself, congratulations on a podium finish in the feature race, a P2, and also a P10 in the sprint race. It's been a solid day for yourself at Road Atlanta. Has the circuit been kind to you?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Yeah, I didn't get a huge amount of practice in, so it was fine. But I managed to get up to pace before the race. But I had a VR problem for quali, the first race, for the actual start of the race. So I ended up having to start from the pits, which is a bit of a shame because I probably would have been up there a little bit. But other than that, so yes, managed to get my way through a few people up to 10th, which was the ideal spot. And then, yeah, started from pole, and I'm happy with second, to be fair, after everything.
Well, indeed, some difficulties, but you worked your way around them and also found the pace as the day went on. And just talking a little bit about qualifying, that P9 start for yourself in a qualifying field where, to put it in perspective for the guys and girls tuning in at home, less than a second covered the top 18 of the grid, and you found yourself right in the middle of it in P9. It must have been absolutely unbearable knowing where you would qualify given the closeness. I mean, you took P9 by only what was 5,000ths over Remco Ployset, and in the end only missed out on P8 by what was 200ths.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know it's only a minute lap, but like a 10th or two, you can just find that on one corner sometimes, and that's enough to get you from like 10th up to like probably top 5. So yeah, every little bit counts on this track, on this layout, I should say.
Well, indeed, every little moment counts, but a P9 set yourself up for a fifth row grid start. Of course, it didn't quite work out that when having to start from the back of the pack in the pit lane, but you fought your way on through. And with regards to fighting your way through, just take us through what it's like trying to overtake here at Road Atlanta, because there seems to be plenty of road space, but there's places where you don't overtake, and there's places where you can overtake. That seems to be the theme.
Yeah, obviously that not the last corner, but into the last chicane there, that's always a good place. And then into turn 1 as well. That's the only real 2 places worth risking. Otherwise, you'll end up obviously losing loads of time trying to pass someone into the other corners. And it's worth just sitting behind and making sure you make it on those 2 corners. Otherwise, yeah, you lose too much time. Yeah.
Well, indeed, and finding the right place to overtake so critical, and in the end fighting your way up into the big medley, the battle from P7 through to P13. Those last couple of laps in the sprint race, they must have been very intense, because one moment you're in P10, the next moment you're P9, the next moment you're in P11, but everybody wants to be P9 or P10 in that scenario.
Yeah, there was a group of us, it must have been about 7 or 8 of us, which I think the front of the group must have been P7 or something. So I was 12th, 13th, sitting back there, and I had to get up to 10th. But luckily enough, obviously everyone fighting, 2 people took each other out, and I was in 12th, so I ended up in 10th. And I didn't fight for the 9th, a little bit maybe, but not enough to, I thought pole is better than second in the next race. So yeah, just held back a bit.
Well, a smart approach to the finish of the sprint race, and then turning things around into the feature. A relatively calm start between yourself and Neil Gardner, but we saw quite quickly that there seems to be a little bit of strategy playing out with regards to some fuel saving.
Yeah, I knew that was going on behind me. I was just going flat out as much, fast as I could. If I broke the second, the draft, then great. I may have got a bit more gap, but I knew I came in a little bit earlier because I just thought, what the hell, I'll come in. I didn't fuel enough. I knew it. As soon as I left, I was like, oh no. But had the chance to sort of fuel save a little bit, yeah.
Well, indeed, and not taking enough fuel to get to the end without having to do some fuel saving of your own. It looked as though when Perez found his way through towards the end, it was almost as if you'd attached yourself to the back of him and said, right, just pull me along to a P2, please.
Yeah, pretty much, although I was still concerned I was going too quick for the fuel I had left following Perez, because obviously he's very quick anyway, he's much quicker than me. But it was always like, if I could sit there, but then I just dropped back too far. Then he had that incident where he went off onto the grass, and that just probably helped me enough to get to the finish. Because obviously Nathan, I would speak to Nathan as we raced, but he was gaining. And I just thought, whatever, I'm not letting him through. Even if I run out, I'll just try and hold the line or whatever. But yeah, he had me. He would have had me, definitely.
Well, it was very close between the two of you in the end. Only 3 tenths separating you both at the finish line, but you held on to a podium finish and P2. And, well, I have to ask, with that, and now you've had a taste of a podium, I think your first podium of the season, unless I'm mistaken. Can we expect plenty more podiums?
I would have thought so. If I, yeah, I'm up there, I feel. I can finish top 5, top 10, you know. So it's just a matter of getting a little bit of practice in, and the fuel, I got to sort that out. I don't really know. I get in the pits and I'm like, oh, this may be enough, I'll go. And then it's like, I need to like suss it out a bit more. But yeah, hopefully podiums I'll be fighting for, definitely.
Well, I'm loving the confidence. And speaking of practice, the next circuit you'll be practicing for rounds 9 and 10 is Summit Point Raceway. How are you feeling for the American circuit?
Yeah, good. I like that track. Yeah, quite confident. I know there's a few people that might become, because Fridays some people don't make it and things. I know there'll be a few fasties, I reckon, back next week. So, but yeah, no, quite confident with that track. A little bit of practice definitely required there.
Well, we look forward to seeing how you get on there in a week's time. But just before we do let you go, Nick, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
Yeah, well, obviously yourself for doing the broadcast. It's very good, I must say. Reeling off, you know, keep constant conversation going. That's very good. And yeah, obviously Geoff and others who have helped sort all this out, and it's very good. And yeah, it's sort of bringing a bit of life back to the Skippy.
Oh, indeed, keeping the Skippy alive is the motto of this series, and you're one of the many drivers keeping it alive. And it's been a pleasure to have you with us this evening, Nick, in the interview room. Congratulations once again on the feature race podium P2 and a P10 in the sprint, and we look forward to seeing you out on circuit in a week's time at Summit Point.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Hopefully I'll be back in the interview room soon. Okay. Good.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
So hearing there from Nick Vaughan Roberts, the privateer who brought on home the podium in the feature race in an absolutely determined drive, albeit the challenge in the end on the fuel. And as he said it himself, it is all about just starting to master that fuel strategy in terms of fuel saving versus how much fuel he needs in the pit lane and getting to the end of the races, plus a little bit of extra practice going in. But he's definitely starting to emerge as one of those drivers who's pushing for the top 5, if not the podium. And I get the feeling we're definitely going to see a few more podiums from Nick Vaughan Roberts before this championship is over, or at least that's going to be his goal. And well, we love to see him absolutely flying out there on circuit. And what can he do next time? That'll be the big question, I'm sure, will be on the minds of many, including Nathan Wade, who just held him off at the end. But as they make their way on around here in the replay, we make our way on around to our third and final interview of today, and that is, of course, Cristian Pérez from Astro Racing. Now, bringing on home the win in the feature race and the 4th place in the sprint. There was, of course, a little bit of a change with regards to how the sprint race ended after it was a very strong pole lap in qualifying what looked to be perhaps a certain opportunity to take the win in the sprint. But let's hear his perspective on it now as he gets ready to join me in the interview room. As we just do wait for the Spanish driver to get ready to join us here, it will be also interesting to hear his perspective on dealing with the mannerisms and escapades of Nick Vaughan Roberts, and also what was Terry McGrath in terms of their fuel saving or their charge to try and break away. But as Cristian Pérez joins me now in the interview room. Cristian, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, good evening to you, Cristian, and congratulations on your win in the feature and a 4th place in the sprint race. I think there was a double win on the cards here today, but still, you picked up plenty of points. You must be happy with that.
Yeah, I'm very happy with both races. I had some spin in first race, and that made me go to the 4th, but it was a very pretty fun race. And then in the second, I spin myself before pitting, so I lost 5 seconds. And I almost lose the race because of me. That was all. Yeah.
Or indeed, a couple of scary moments in your races. But before we come on to those specifically, let's talk a little bit about qualifying. Pole position by a 10th in the end in one of the closest qualifying sessions of the season. You must have been really proud of that pole lap.
Well, I really have to say thank you to Rasmus because we did a great job in quali. So both of us could get the pole. I did the best lap, but he just went, I think, 1/10 slower. So he really helped me, and I helped him. So it was a really teamwork.
Well, a good effort between the two of you, and it benefited you both in the end with the pair of you starting on the front row. Then the racing went underway, and it looked as though it was the three of you, so yourself, Vuori, and also Nathan Wade, battling back and forth, exchanging places, and it all kicked off in the final stages of the sprint.
Yeah. We were like just chilling first laps, and then the fight comes in the last laps, and that's one where you can crash. I crashed with Rasmus, nothing to protect me, nothing, because I really doubted in that turn. I didn't know if Rasmus was going to be able to go in the outside, and I didn't make it too pretty good, so I spin, and that passed me as well in the second race. In the last lap of my first stint, I was going full gas for do a great lap, and I spin myself. I went out in the T1, so that was very bad for me.
Oh, indeed, it was a difficult one for yourself, but still bouncing back. And, well, in the feature race in particular, we saw the freeway fight between yourself, Nick Vaughan Roberts, and also Terry McGrauther, but it looked as though you were doing a huge amount of fuel saving compared to them. Was that always the aim, to just simply undercut them on fuel?
Yeah, I was saving a lot of fuel, and my intentions were to go full laps of fuel. So I stayed until lap 17. 17, no. Well, And then I just spawned myself, so I lost 5 seconds before pit in that lap. So I was going to exit the pit like 3 seconds or 2.5 seconds ahead of Terry, but I really spin on myself, so that was all.
Well, with that spin, we saw you take a relatively short pit stop, but you had the fuel to get to the end. Meanwhile, Nick Vaughan Roberts and Terry McGrauther both didn't have the fuel. Were you expecting them to be running out of fuel?
No, I was not. I was ready for my fuel because I had in my head what I have to do, but with with that spin, every I I really thought that my race was gone, but nothing can stop me. No, I'm joking, but it just was try to save like like hell, and then just calculate how many laps left, how many fuel I need to go full throttle, and put it in, and just don't click the fuel until I get, I think, 5 liters, and then go. So I was expecting that Terry goes ahead of me because of that, but it was not too far, and he had to save as well as Nick, so I could go full throttle and overtake him and Nick.
Well, it worked out in your favour in the end, given they had not taken enough fuel to get to the end. And once you'd taken the lead, you never seemed to look back, albeit Nathan Wade was closing and closing fast.
Yeah, he was. Um, I I make a mistake and then Nick passed me, but he had to save more. So that was not really a problem for me because he had to save. I had to save a little bit, but not that much. And Nathan was really quick. He was doing more or less my pace, so I just focus on don't do more mistakes and finish the race.
Indeed, and bringing on home a successful win in the feature race, and that moves you now into P2 in the championship standings. Of course, Nathan Wade does have a sizable advantage over you, approximately what is 80 points going into the next round, but do you think you can close it down?
I think he said he doesn't care to the championship or something like that. I think he's lying. But yeah, I'm P2, but I don't know if I'm going to do all the races. I don't really think so. He's the contender here to the championship. I hope someone can match his pace and battle him a little bit more. And when I show up, I will try, of course.
Indeed, and you've got the pace to match Nathan Wade, and only time will tell which one of the two of you will be leading at the front of the pack as time goes on. But just before we do let you go, Cristian, firstly I have to ask, Summit Point Raceway awaits us next week. How are you feeling for the American circuit?
It is Summit Point. Well, it is a good track. Not very corners where you can find a difference. So it will be a very close quali and a very close race, and probably a pretty fun race if the people wants to fight, because it will be like a group of 10 cars if the cars in the 7-8 position doesn't fight too much. So it will be very, very close race. I don't know if I will be there, but I will see it from broadcast.
Well, we do hope you're able to make it on circuit, but if not, we'll be happy to have you tuning in and enjoying the action. And just before we let you go, is there anybody you'd like to give a thank you or a shout out to on tonight's broadcast?
Of course. To my friend, I don't remember his name, but he was number 12. I really want to congratulate him, and I make him this win for him.
Well, I'm sure the number 12 driver, and I do believe that's Tim at Bertie, will appreciate that. But with that, Cristian, it's been a pleasure having you join me as always in the interview room. Congratulations on your double top 5 results today, including a win in the feature race, and we hope to see you out on the circuit in a week's time.
Okay. Ciao, ciao.
All the best. So here and there from Cristian Pérez, a very happy driver as always, the Astro Racing driver, with the pole position in qualifying today being matched up by a 4th place in the sprint, which I think you feel as though, you know, not too angry or upset about, but at the same time, there could have been a little bit more out there today, but still bringing it on around to bring home the win in the feature race through a brilliant strategic approach, despite the fact a spin or two almost cost him the win by a clear margin, but still bring it on home there. And it goes to show you the number 89 driver really coming on strong as the season progresses, and could he be the one to take the fight to Nathan Wade when everything balances out, drop rounds come into effect, and indeed miss rounds also apply. We'll have to wait and see, but he is emerging as the number 1 challenger to our championship leader. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our post-round interviews for today. You've just heard from Astro Racing's Cristian Pérez in the 89 car, and you've previously heard from the number 5 of Nathan Wade, the privateer, and also the fellow privateer in the number 27 of Nick Vaughan Roberts. Congratulations to all 3 of them for their results today and their performances, and thank you to them for joining me in the interview room. But with that, it is now time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed today's show and you want to know more about the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, perhaps you're sat there right now thinking, you know, I like the look of that car, or perhaps you're a Skip Barber Formula 2000 fan on iRacing and you've always wanted to be part of a series that helps keep the Skippy alive. Well, why not join our Discord today? Invite link available on screen, and you can get in touch with the drivers, the organisers, and everybody in between, and join up in the series, or just chat to the drivers if you want to be more part of the social aspects of the series. Of course, great friends in opinion amongst all the drivers said they may be rivals on circuit, but they're friends off of it. We'd also like to take a moment to give a big thank you to our sponsor, and that is Musical Money. Their web address, musical-money.co.uk, the quick, easy and safe way to turn your musical equipment into money. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, now our drivers will need to be on the money next time, for in a week's time, on Friday the 14th of April 2023, we'll be heading to the state of West Virginia in the United States of America for the Summit Point Raceway Motorsports Park. It is a circuit that is tight, but it's also fast flying, and with that, as we just heard from Cristian Pérez, it is a circuit that can engender mass battle impacts of drivers of 5 to 10 packs, all trying to battle for the win. But the question will be, who can steer on the clear and narrow to bring on home the wins in the sprints and features there? We'll find out next time. But until then, we wish you all a fantastic Easter weekend. We have been Gone Skipping Racing. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay well, stay safe, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.